The excellent path for human beings. We can learn the course of humanity by using the body and mind as our scriptures, that is, to try and be aware while using the body and the mind. To study and watch, to know and see, by using the method of developing awareness as taught by Luangpor Teean Jidasubho, namely the rhythmic meditation of moving the arms, and the walking meditation. To intentionally make movements, in order to first see the body, which is coarse, and later on, to see the mind or to see thought, concocting things up. Let's compare developing awareness with a child learning how to write. When the teacher writes an A, or a B, on the blackboard, the child remembers it and can write it too. Studying and knowing about the body and the mind is similar. First, we have to train in awareness to see the body and mind clearly, then we will be able to use awareness well. We practice the rhythmic and walking meditation, in order to clearly know with awareness the movements of the body. When we see the movements of the body clearly, we will see the mind clearly also. We don't have to go and look for the mind, but we depend on watching the movements of the body, which will automatically take us to the movements of the mind. Keep watching the body all the time, try and watch with intention, acknowledge the feeling that arises at the time the body is moving, for example while doing the rhythmic and walking meditation. In one day, one can know many, many times. While being aware of the movements of the body, sometimes there may be many things that delude one, for example thoughts that arise unintentionally. Usually this happens when we're doing our best to develop awareness. Take it to be a lesson, an experience that comes to teach us something, to come back again to the body and re-establish awareness with the movements of the body. Delusion teaches us to not be deluded. For people who are peaceful by nature, it is easy to be aware and to have sati sampajanya. The practice of meditation places much importance on awareness, and always feeling oneself, realizing one's actions, because sati sampajanya is able to change what is bad into good, and what is wrong into right. One who is aware tends to do what is good, because awareness is the source of sila, samadhi, and panya. So, we find a method to study and understand our minds by watching both the body and the mind. When we are skilled at watching the body and mind with awareness, and we clearly understand the body and the mind, we will know what merit and evil is, and what religion means. We will come into contact with virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom. We don't just think about it, we experience it. This is a law of nature. Therefore, make effort to always watch and see the body, knowing and seeing it through the mind contacting it. It is just like a teacher writing something on the blackboard for the students to see. First we have to make an effort to watch. Determine to watch until you won't forget. Before, the A and the B were on the blackboard, but now, we contact the A and the B in our minds because we've paid attention. Watching the body and mind with sati compares with a computer that records information. When we put information in our minds by regularly training in watching and seeing, we evolve. This makes us see the body and mind as it really is. Understanding and knowledge about our bodies and minds will arise until the course of humanity is finished. This is called realization. Realization compares to stepping out of the darkness. We see our own minds and we don't get caught up in various manifestations. We see physical and mental things for what they are. We see the nature of both the body and the mind, and we see what kind of physical and mental manifestations there are, for example, heat, cold, like and dislike. If we don't see clearly, we yield to nama and rupa and their conditions, and we are under the power of proliferating thoughts. But when we are fully aware, we escape from that power. It is like solving a mathematical problem. One is able to do it when there is nothing hindering the mind. So, to come to understand the body and the mind is like finishing the basic course completely. Before, we used to be caught up with the conditions of mind. For example, being the one who is hot, when feeling hot, being the one who is cold, when feeling cold, being the one who is hungry, when feeling hungry, or being the one who endures pain, when feeling pain. We were the one who is caught up with all those manifestations. This is called to yield to conditions, letting them be the boss. When awareness arises, those things cannot be the boss any longer because we see that they are just conditions of the body and mind. Anger, for example, is a condition, it is not permanent and it doesn't have any essence. To see like this, is therefore comparable to the arising of a magic eye, that receives and knows the expressions of the body and the mind. The magic eye means, to be fully aware and to see that Rupa Dhamma, and Nama Dhamma, are subject to the three characteristics, of impermanence, valuelessness, and non-selfhood. Then, we're able to let go of body and mind. This is similar to not having a whole lot of rubbish scattered all over the place, as we did before. Whatever happens to the body and the mind, we throw all those conditions of body and mind into the three characteristics of anajjung, dukkung, and anatta. Before, we had lots of garbage which was a hassle, there were stains of suffering, stains of anger, of desire, of delusion, of love, of hatred, of heat, and cold. But now, we don't have all that rubbish anymore. It is merit to see impermanence or to see the three characteristics. Merit here, refers to seeing the conditions of body and mind, and to be able to use the body and mind in one's life, in the right way. Evil is to not know the conditions of body and mind, it is compared to darkness. Such a person is considered to be uncultivated, both the body and mind are undeveloped because one allows proliferation to be in charge. This makes one hold on to anger, lust, and delusion. Sometimes one lets anger be there for several days. When we clearly see and realize the body and the mind like this, we are no longer uncultivated, we are high-class people. Religions deal exclusively with people, they are teachings about the body and the mind. We all have a body and a mind. Both merit and evil can be found within us, in our actions. When we practice up to this point, Rupa and Nama, or the body and the mind, treat each other in the right way. Before, the body and the mind were oppressing each other all the time, for example when hot or cold feelings would arise in the body, the mind would suffer, or when anger would arise in the mind, the body would be uncomfortable. They would oppress each other all the time. But now, we see the body and the mind relating to each other in the right way, because awareness is there to watch them. When we know this much, we have a foundation in practice and we make continuous progress. It is similar to passing elementary school with good marks, and thus having the opportunity to study in high school. Having a foundation means that we're fluent in watching proliferation arising, this makes us see the concoction that's going on. When the state of seeing arises, we don't get carried away with the proliferation that arises. This seeing is an important principle because it is able to smelt and digest all of the defilements. This compares to studying well and being able to read and understand the meaning. From the state of continuously watching, we come to see convention and suffering. The state of watching gives rise to fluency, it is like having a good tool, it makes us proceed on the road of life all the time, and we don't get to a blind alley. Not seeing suffering, or the suffering connected with the body and the mind makes us grasp onto it, all of which is a burden. When we see clearly, some types of suffering drop off immediately because we see the world as being full of convention, some of it are material things, others are mental. Even language is convention, the world is full of it. It is called the conventional norm. In the past, I learned many superstitious chants, I used to sit and recite them at night. I had verses for making holy water, for going into the forest, for dressing, for eating, for leaving the house and for catching cows and buffaloes, for all of it. It was over the top. The happiness I got from it was little, if any. It is like a trader in kapok or fiber, he or she gets little money. In terms of merit, it is little merit and it is not lasting. But now, I'm no longer a trader in kapok or fiber, now I'm a trader in diamonds and I get loads of money. Seeing convention makes one able to completely give up on those verses. For example, the chants about the 108 virtuous qualities of the Buddha, belief in various ceremonies, invulnerability verses, which one has to recite until one feels that one becomes big and one's skin becomes tough. These things I have completely discarded. Instead, lightness of body and mind arose. I realized what convention is. Whatever somebody does, I understand it, whoever does right or wrong, I know. When I fell into the well of knowledge, I saw all things in the world as being full of objective matter, ultimate meaning, and changing conditions. I saw that all things have causes and are conditioned. For example, I saw that sometimes an object can be supposed as good, as bad, as likable, or as not likable. Ordinary people assume words like love, hate, like, dislike, beautiful, ugly, they take this person to be good and that person to be not good. This is all quite ordinary, but it makes one not free in seeing. This is called, knowing convention, the norm, and ultimate meaning. On knowing these things the mind is set free because the state of seeing clearly has arisen. Falling in the well of knowledge means to know in all postures and all movements, one knows while walking, while sitting, while seeing, while hearing, etc. This is called the arising of wisdom knowledge. It leads us out of the various problems. Seeing clearly supports our continuous progress, one comes to know what virtue is, what firmness of mind is, what wisdom is. One really makes contact with merit, it is not like before when we just had ideas about it. I can assure you that the mind that really experiences merit, doesn't fall in hell, is not a hungry ghost and is not a thick-headed demon because one knows what is right and wrong. To experience merit is therefore useful. To come into contact with evil teaches one to let go of it. It is similar to having stepped on a thorn, when we see thorns, we don't step on them as before. So, really making contact with merit is for the extinguishing of suffering, for peace, and for liberation. When we stay with virtue, we experience virtue, there is normality in both the body and the mind, the body is in its normal state and the mind is in order, the mind doesn't go up and down, it doesn't run wild. The state of normality of the body and mind is virtue, firmness of mind, and wisdom, thorough understanding, arising, which keeps purifying the mind and sets it free. Knowing the causes and conditions makes one not stupid, not deluded, and one is able to contact sila, samadhi, panya. This is called the training in virtue, it is the virtue that arises from the path of practice. The state of watching and then seeing, and having seen, not being caught up, is the genuine path to overcome suffering. When one watches continuously, the mind will be purified, it is the living of the spiritual life. This is the way to come in touch with virtue. Always stay with this state, it is the training in sila. It is the virtue that melts and eats up the corruptions of mind, and one is able to let go of evil, do what is good and purify the mind. It can be taken that the training in virtue is really advantageous. It is not the kind of virtue that one recites in a ceremony. Right now, in carrying on with one's life, one can find virtue. One is then someone with real virtue. Sila makes the body, speech, and mind normal. At this stage, we have really become a human being, and really closed the door to hell and the evil destinations, because we know the path, we know virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom through experience. It is not knowing through memory, thinking or figuring things out. Rather, we meet and see, we experience sila, samadhi and panya, we experience the noble path and the spiritual life, brahmacharya, which is purity. Before, it was as if there was more than one person inside, one person was the watcher, one person was the thinker, and the one who made movements was still another person. But now, in the state of watching, all three come together as one. The state of watching arises, when developing awareness with the movements of the rhythmic and walking meditation, it makes it easy to know and see the movements of the body and the mind, the concocting thoughts. In the past, proliferation would control us completely, and that would give rise to sleepiness, restlessness, doubts, etc. But with awareness, we are able to conquer proliferation, and those mind states no longer exist anymore. This compares to traveling on a highway. When we pass this town and that village, where do we get to and what is it like beyond there? Well, nobody has to tell us, we know, see, and experience that for ourselves, naturally. Next, one comes to know, see, and experience what angels are. Angels are people who are ashamed of doing anything that is evil. They don't dare to think evil thoughts, speak evil words, or do evil things. Before, I used to understand that angels were up in the clouds. I thought that there was a heaven up there. It's all right to believe that, but those angels cannot help us. The kind of angels that arise within us refer to having a sense of shame of wrongdoing. One doesn't dare to think, speak, or act in evil ways. One doesn't even dare to think. This is what angels are. Angels are within us, so we don't have to bow to them, we don't have to pray to them. I had never thought like this or known like this, and so I would like people to study and come to know it, to practice with it. One day, as I was doing walking meditation, I thought to myself, this person probably doesn't know, that person probably doesn't know. I thought about my parents, my relatives. I wanted them to do walking meditation, I wanted them to sit down and build up awareness. I thought with loving kindness and compassion, I wanted to help them. Walking on the excellent path makes us go beyond being a man or a woman, being a hungry ghost, a demon, or a devil. One becomes a human being, one who has a superior mind. Someone with virtue, who lives one's life according to the noble path. One abandons what is evil and does what is wholesome. One's mind is like that of the gods. One knows merit and evil, and one genuinely understands Buddhism. This is what the excellent path leads us to see and understand. Religion exists in people's very hearts if those people refrain from evil, perform only good actions, and their virtue is pure. But if one still thinks in evil ways, it can be taken that one hasn't reached Buddhism, even when one recites the words Buddhang, Dhammang, Sanghang, Saranang Gacchami, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Religions teach people not to have suffering, religions teach people to do good. If one is still suffering, one is not reckoned as one who has reached the religion. One's life might become blemished, it might go downhill. When we arrive at religion, we relinquish evil and do only what is right. This compares to someone who does certain things, until he or she makes a living with it and is stable in it. He or she is able to depend on it, in order to live his or her life. This is how we experience things. The state of watching and then seeing, and when seeing, not being caught up, is the most concise action. It is like the Dhamma is really in our fist, we don't have to do a lot. Before, I was in a mess, I clung to ceremonies, clung to others and believed in rituals. I was even afraid of my own thoughts, because with thoughts come doubt, fear, love, and hate. But when full awareness arose, I wasn't like that anymore because I determined to only just watch. It was as if my life came down to just doing that much. Studying and practicing until one reaches the state of watching and seeing, and not getting caught up, is the point of completeness, the point where all things come together. It is the diamond of the Dhamma, because one is able to smelt the fetters, 10 deep-rooted and subconscious tendencies in the mind. Seeing Rupa and Nama, seeing suffering, seeing convention and seeing the mind proliferating, gradually diminishes the ego. The mind gradually turns into one of a human being, which means that there is morality as a refuge. The way to hell and the bad destinations is closed off, because one refrains from evil, only does what is good and really makes the mind pure. The door of the truth is opened, the mind is free because one can destroy the ego. One abandons the first 3 fetters, namely, personality view, doubt, and attachment to precepts and practices. At this point, the mind changes and comes to see and understand. Before, it was as if the ego was hiding by the door. But now, the watcher keeps a watch over the door. As soon as the ego appears, it is discovered and the ego falls apart because it can't endure verification. It could be compared to a tree that has fruit. As soon as one shakes it a bit, some fruits will fall down. And in the same way, greed, hatred, and delusion, and those three fetters that are deeply instinctive and are conditions, that arise from the body and the mind, drop off and disappear. The mind that changes into a noble one, is the superior mind that is able to destroy the ego. When one experiences this, the ego drops off and is finished with. It is as if wholesomeness and unwholesomeness, or dirtiness and cleanliness are separated. Being a noble one is to have this kind of excellent mind. This is how the mind changes. It is not a matter of changing clothes, or changing one's words. It is not a matter of ordaining, using this or that ceremony. That is just convention, that is being a monk through convention. But when one is a noble individual, one is far removed from suffering and defilement. Suffering and defilement are the enemies of life. The ego with its attachment is an enemy of life, because wherever there is ego, it is like having stains of losing, of winning, of happiness, of suffering, of getting, of losing, etc. When one can relinquish the ego, it is like having a dilapidated car that gets fixed up, and restored to its normal condition. The body and the mind are the same. The path of Dhamma takes us to this point. It is the excellent path, it is number one, it is the superb path of life. When reaching this point, one experiences what it is to be a noble one. The mind that makes this shift, is a diamond of Dhamma, it is the doorway to truth. As we chant in the evenings, the Sangha that is born from the good Dhamma, is endowed with such virtuous qualities as practicing well. Being born from the good Dhamma, is right here, the noble Sangha is born right here, it is born from developing awareness, until one reaches the very state of watching and seeing, and on seeing not being caught up. This state of watching is the path, it is the spiritual life. If one compares it with a road, it is a smooth highway. Lust, irritation, conceit, and attachment to views and opinions, that one used to have and was caught up in, dry up. Comparable to fruits that are, all shriveled up, still in the tree. Purity arises, it is high sila, high samadhi and high panyat. It is the aggregate of virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom, and they get better all the time. The body doesn't do anything bad, speech doesn't say anything bad, and the mind doesn't think anything bad. One is separated from evil and one gets further and further removed from enemies. Suppose, before, we were driving very slowly along a bumpy road full of holes. As soon as we get to the smooth highway, we can drive at ease and we don't get stuck, we can keep going. One becomes skilled at being in the state of watching, seeing because of watching, and on seeing not being drawn in, it becomes more and more an art. Whatever one does, if one is an artist, one can do it excellently. For example, a painter who uses just a single pen or a single brush. He or she is able to fluently produce an image of a mountain. It is a magical thing that improves continuously. I try to bring up comparisons through using convention, because the truth is sometimes hard to put into words. When the state arises where there is supreme virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom, the supreme spiritual life and supreme purity, one abandons the various things that used to intervene, both in the body and the mind, it changes altogether. Whatever passes, whatever one experiences, one really knows and sees it for oneself. It is like when we finish something, we know that it is finished. One reflects on the Dhamma that one knows and sees and liberated one. How did it arise? There is more and more a sense of separation and reflection, happiness and joy arise. It is comparable to being pulled along by a current, going to the sea, one doesn't have to make any effort. Or it is like a strong man, he is able to lift up weights immediately. It is the same with the paths and fruits of practice, from the first stage of enlightenment upwards. It is smooth and refined. This can destroy the ego, and the defilements starve. At this stage, no perception arises and there is no deluded identification. It feels like it's hard to think and get carried away. To go back and think in ways that make one be something or other, makes one's hair stand on end. Anyway, neither the mind nor the body would be caught up in it. The corruptions of mind shrink back. One can no longer think like that. Old perceptions have disappeared. It is as if one is born anew. Having arrived at this point, it seems as if the ego is gone. There is nobody left. The self has been burned up by knowledge. It is like shriveling up. It is the ending of all perception. The mind is free. It is as if a state arises that is parted and disconnected. It looks vague and indistinct. The five aggregates that one used to cling to, that were the germ, now don't get anything to eat and so they starved and a separation takes place. Before, form, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness would work together, but they would each have their own function. Now, they dried up, everything shriveled up, as if they had become loose and come apart. Sometimes I would still be deluded enough to connect them, but they wouldn't hold together. Even when connected, there were only just processes. All speech and all thoughts were purely just processes only. It was the end of proliferation in life, the finish of craving and attachment. When reaching this state, one knows that the paths, the fruits of practice and nibbana, really do exist. One knows that non-birth, non-aging, non-sickness, and non-death, really do exist. Luangpor Teean knew this matter, right at this point. The Buddha, the Dhamma, the Noble Sangha, the paths, the fruits, and nibbana, really exist. We are really able to be liberated in this lifetime. Teaching people to know this matter, can be taken to be the greatest thing in the life of human beings. It is better to teach people to reach this final goal than to teach generosity, because this leads to the end of suffering, the end of being. This is the most excellent thing. If this state arises, then help to support this teaching. If there is nobody to talk about it, there won't be anybody to listen to it, and the Dhamma will completely disappear. I consider talking about the truth to be my profession. When one takes the truth as one's profession, one has to talk. If nobody shows people how to practice, it will be the end of the truth. If you are interested to study and practice, I will arrange food and a convenient enough place, a hut or a meditation hall for you to use, so you can try out training yourself. Before, I used to live out in the country, far from civilization. When many people would come to practice, there would be a problem. Sometimes there would be a deficiency of things, which would make it inconvenient for the practitioners. But at present, I have a place, and if you're interested, I will look after things. I will be your friend as far as I can. We will share happiness and suffering. Don't suffer by yourself. I'm sure that I won't lead you along the wrong path, because I have discovered the path to some extent. When seeing suffering, one discovers suffering. When seeing something that is wrong, one overcomes what is wrong, and when one discovers the path, one can reach the final destination. No matter whether you are ordained as a monk or not, I have a place prepared for you. If you have suffering, don't do anything else. I really have found the way out. It is the number one way. Reflect on this, but you shouldn't just use reasoning. You shouldn't create conflicts or just have blind faith. Don't be averse to anything. These words are just words. Once they have been received, they might disappear, but if you're interested, try out to practice. If you read these words and immediately confidence arises, it is not right. First, practice. If, having practiced, results arise, then be confident. If, having practiced, there are no results, then find another method. Meditation is something that has to be tried out through practice. When one experiences it by oneself, one's actions will sort things out. or destine the course of one's life, by themselves. It is not a matter of figuring things out or memorizing, one must put things into practice and one must experience things for oneself. Being aware is to develop the four foundations of awareness. Anybody who turns up the hand or makes other movements, and is aware of it, is practicing in the right way, because awareness is the sprout of enlightenment, that is, it makes wisdom spring up. One must start up from this point of making use of movements. It really is the birthplace of the four foundations of awareness. This really is the excellent path. It is called, Agamagko Visuddhya, the excellent path for purification. Buddha arises from building up a lot of awareness. One has to do that oneself and practice oneself. The method of developing awareness, as Luangpor Teean teaches, is really up to date. The more diligent one is in building up awareness, the more one knows, sees, and understands one's life. Awareness is with us all, as long as we have a body and a mind. To have awareness is the treasure of a human being. It is the same for all of us, without exception. No matter what country you live in, what nationality you may have, or what language you may speak. Be aware, just raising the arm, feeling it, is already good enough. Guidance to train oneself. We must use our lives to train ourselves diligently. We must take ourselves to the ultimate and final goal. This is called an excellent life. If we don't train ourselves, it is easy to get involved in things. For example, if there is suffering, we suffer until we die. So we have to train diligently in order to overcome doubt, worry, sadness, anger, desire, delusion, etc. This is called following a good example. The characteristics of our thoughts are the same, they don't differ much. Whatever one is familiar with, one thinks about that, following our disposition and character. The environment has an influence on our lives. For example, someone is born in a good family but the environment is no good, and it gives that person information that is no good. The result is that that person receives bad information. A bad past leads life to delusion and bad actions. This is a law of nature. There are certain states of mind that we shouldn't surrender to, such as doubt and worry, because we still have a way out. Try to reflect on the examples that good people set. The Buddha, for instance, he is the founder of a religion, the enlightened one, the one who clearly understands the world. We should study his example, so that we will understand why the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, religion, merit, heaven, and Nibbana, really do exist. If we still have doubt about this, it means that we still have suffering. We must understand these matters clearly and go beyond doubt. If one still tries to figure these things out, still doubts and worries, one still suffers. These things should be understood clearly and doubt should be done with, because there are teachers that can teach us how to know and see these things. In the past, I heard that Luangpor Teean Jidasubho was a teacher who taught how to clearly understand merit and evil, heaven and hell, and the paths and fruits of practice. Since I had doubts about practice, I went to study with him. When I first set out to practice, I still held on to views and opinions, and didn't accept certain things that Luangpor taught. I would use reasoning to contradict his teachings, and consequently like and dislike would arise. These things are hindrances that prevent knowledge and understanding from arising in practice. Therefore, when a teacher gives advice, one should first study and try it out through practice. Luangpor Teean taught me to develop awareness, which I had never come across or seen before. He taught me to have sati, and to be diligent in building up lots of awareness. Awareness, as I had learned it as a child, and at the time that I was studying the Dhamma, meant to recollect. I had trained in awareness with other methods, for example the kind of meditation where one sits with eyes closed and recites a mantra, in order to make the mind peaceful. I used to do it that way. Everybody seemed to be teaching like that, to sit with the back so straight that one starts to sweat and one gets backaches. Some people are very serious and force themselves. That's the way that I used to do it. I trained in this until the mind became peaceful, and happiness arose which was pleasant. When I trained with Luangpor Teean, he taught me to be aware and not to go for peacefulness. He taught not to control thoughts but to just know indifferently, which was certainly a strange way of teaching. Before I could catch the awareness in practicing, there were definitely many things that snared me. Sometimes, I fell back to my old practices, and as soon as I would raise my arms to do the rhythmic meditation, I would go back to being peaceful and stay with happiness, because that was more convenient than diligently knowing. An old man of over 70 practiced together with us. He advised me not to just sit there being peaceful, because that is not useful at all, but rather, to be diligent in building up the quality of knowing, to be aware while making movements. He kept guiding and looking after me. In the end I asked myself, what's the point of being fooled by thoughts? That's just an old habit. Let's train and be diligent in building up the quality of knowing. One has to control oneself by determining that, if I get lost in proliferating thoughts, I will try to be aware by making use of objects to know, such as movements of the hands. As soon as one turns up the hand, one really feels it, one really sees it by oneself. Whenever the hands move, one is aware. When one can catch the feeling of moving more and more often, proliferation gradually diminishes. In this way, I got a foundation and really saw results. Previously, I used to think about the future and the past, but now concoction would stop on seeing thought, and I would stay with the present, stay with the movements. One really knows the movement of turning up the hand, one doesn't have to wait for even a second. One knows again and again, one really knows many times. When there is truly a lot of knowing, one becomes diligent in building up the quality of knowing continuously, just as when one keeps diligently working and gets lots of work done. So, if one really catches the quality of knowing, and one is really diligent in building it up, one gets plenty of knowing. It is useful to have lots of knowing, because whenever one gets lost in thoughts, going all the way into the past or the future, the quality of knowing pulls one back, so that one doesn't easily flow with thought. Whenever one is swept away with proliferating thoughts, one immediately comes back, one is really able to come back. We're able to train and give rise to the quality of knowing in the various postures, for example, while doing walking meditation, or making movements with the arms. Whatever you take hold of, know it. The breathing, know it. Just have only this quality of knowing, and you will have a foundation. Before, I used to stay with the breathing. I would recite a mantra and seek peace, I would force myself to be peaceful. It is useful to practice like that because one gets peaceful and understands what peace is. But when I reached the state of knowing, I understood that the state of being aware and awake is something different from peace altogether. Awareness gives rise to knowing, one doesn't stay with peace. When we blink our eyes, we can know. When we swallow saliva, we can know. Moving a finger, we can know. Breathing, we can know. Whenever we touch something, we can know. These are examples. Therefore, creating this quality of knowing is a kind of art. It can be created in all postures and movements. All it takes is that one puts forth effort to know what's happening within one's body. It is comparable to having a set of tools that one uses to build up lots and lots of knowing. If one does it in the right way, diligence arises. There is an old saying that says that it is as easy as rolling a boulder downhill. But if one doesn't do it in the right way, it is as hard as rolling a boulder uphill. When one does it right, one gets a foundation and one becomes diligent to practice and build up awareness, without anybody having to tell one tells oneself and creates plenty of knowing. One becomes diligent to know in using one's daily life, always trying to find ways to be aware. Even though at times people or friends cause us to get lost, we make effort to avoid that. We are careful to take the chance, to know for ourselves the things that arouse knowing, nobody has to tell us. It's like working, when we do it right we are diligent and fluent, but if we don't do it right it's like banging our head against a brick wall. We know and see for ourselves what delusion is like and what knowing is like. We know and see what the advantages and disadvantages of knowing and delusion are. And so, we prevent and deal with things automatically. One has the answers oneself and doesn't have to ask anybody. If there is a lot of knowing and one knows for long periods of time, one will see the conditions of the body, because the quality of knowing is the one who watches the movements. However, this doesn't mean that one will see this immediately, because sometimes, as the body is moving, instead of just seeing the body, there are things that make us get lost, for example, feelings that arise due to unintentional thoughts, or various moods, either coming from the body or the mind. These things incite us to get lost, but we don't. These things are there, but now we have seen that they are just feelings. People who have trained in meditation before, will just meet with coarse feelings, and the refined feelings that exist in the body and the thinking mind, they won't see. If we build up the quality of knowing until it is the boss, it will be able to distinguish delusion from knowing, even though delusion, proliferation, was in charge before. We will be able to pass through subtle feelings without having to get involved. It compares with traveling and passing through various villages. We leave this and that town behind us, and pass through without getting involved. But someone who easily loses awareness, is incessantly interested in the thoughts that come up, reasoning in every way, and loses a lot of time by thinking. Like, dislike, and all the rest of it arise. This is someone who is not determined to walk the path. The Buddha said that, someone who is heedful is awake when others are asleep. Such a one leaves foolish people far behind, just as a well-trained horse leaves a horse without strength behind. Not getting involved with proliferating thoughts that arise is like this: one moment of knowing is to be removed one moment from not knowing, from delusion. One gets further and further removed and one becomes skilled in knowing. It is easy to know. Before, it was easy to get lost, but when one trains oneself it becomes easy to know. The feelings and the various thoughts that make the body move are nama dhamma. When the qua was a self that was moving. But when one understands rupa and nama, one understands that rupa is something solid, composed of many things. One knows heat, cold, hunger, and pain, because of rupa. Nama is the mind, feelings and thoughts. It receives and knows all kinds of things. There are innumerable conditions that arise together with the mind. Anger, worry, desire, and delusion, are some examples of coarse ones. They make the mind run wild and it takes them to be self. Actually, they are not self, but one doesn't know that they are conditions of mind, and so one acts following them, until those various conditions give rise to a sense of self, of me, being like that. But when the knowing watches and sees them, one understands that they are only just conditionings of the mind, and one can let go. To sum up, the body that is alive is a lump that consists of two things, namely, rupa and nama. At this point one knows how to separate rupa from nama. And so one clearly realizes the relationship between rupa and nama. This may be called the arising of insight knowledge. It is a really clear realization. Reality doesn't deceive. This point can be taken as a universal standard. Teachers cannot deceive disciples, and disciples cannot deceive teachers about it. Whoever comes to this stage, no matter what nationality one has, or language one speaks, one will see like this. Having seen it, there is no more problem, no more doubt. One abandons and puts things down, right there. When we have our eyes open we can see all sorts of things. For example, we see that this is a rock, that is a tree, and that is a snake creeping over there. It's good to see. If we don't see it's dangerous, but when we see, we're safe. But seeing with the eyes can still be deceptive because it is not a realization. Realizations don't deceive, rather, they set one free. There is security in realizations. To see is to make an end of one's burden. When the quality of knowing sees rupa as a lump of suffering, it creates the feeling of having pity on the body, because the body doesn't know anything, it just does its duty. It gives us signals of what is dangerous, for example, heat and cold, so that we can do something about it. We didn't see this before, and so we thought that I am hot and I am cold. But now we see Rupa and so we know how to solve the problem. The body is suffering already as it is just a lump of suffering. One has to breathe, has to swallow saliva, has to blink the eyes, has to stand, has to lie down, has to eat, has to go to the toilet, etc. When we give it more work to do, such as smoking cigarettes, it is a burden for Rupa, we make it suffer even more. The mind is the same. When we're angry, we give the body suffering. This is oppression that works from both sides, from the side of the body as well as from the side of the mind. This kind of relationship between the body and the mind is not appropriate at all. When there is the knowing, or the state of watching, peace arises. And Rupa and Nama relate to each other in the right way. Before, I used to think that I didn't have suffering, because I didn't do anything bad, that was because I didn't know what suffering was. Whoever thinks like this can be taken to be crazy, crazy with self. So, in the past, I didn't understand myself. Likewise, having or being anything, as well believing one's own thinking, is dangerous because one understands that to think like that is good, and one doesn't see that there is any problem to be solved, one assumes that things are like this or like that. One knows through thought, one is through thought, one sees through thought, and one gets and attains through thought, when one is not in contact with the present. When we're faced with facts that contradict what we thought, we don't have a way out of suffering or out of our ideas, constructed in the past. If one knows the suffering of Rupa and Nama, one will understand that they are really lumps of suffering. Pain and sickness are conditions of the body, this is called the disease of the body. Anger, for example, is a condition of the mind, this is called the disease of the mind. When we don't know this, we cling to all kinds of things and create suffering in the mind, such as love, hatred, anger, desire, and delusion. When we wake up from the disease of body and mind, we see the suffering of Rupa and Nama. It is as if this quality of knowing opens the door, and we can see through. The knowing is like an eye. Before, we had our eyes closed and didn't see, there was only just getting caught up with all sorts of conditions. But now, the quality of seeing arises because there is knowing. This is called training oneself. This is the way that I have trained myself. It is really the guideline for people. It makes one see the convention of body and mind, for instance fame, possessions, money, children, husband, wife, land, etc. The world is full of physical and mental objects that are convention, inside as well as outside. One sees this penetratingly. It is as if the power of wisdom knowledge sees that these things are conventions of Rupa and Nama, diseases of Rupa and Nama, Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma. Before, we didn't see these states, and so we got caught up in all kinds of conditions. Knowing convention makes one feel light. In the past, I used to go for all sorts of things, superstition, verses, chants, and I believed in rituals. On performing some of them fear would arise, others would make me bold, doubtful, happy, or sad. I ended up with nothing because it's all nothing but convention. A thing is sometimes assumed to be likable and sometimes not likable, it can change, and we go for it all. When I came to see Rupa Nama and convention, I felt light. It is not like ordinary seeing, but when one sees, suffering disappears. The gross kind of suffering, such as suffering that comes from foolishness, delusion, and stupidity, really disappears. It compares to having finished one's studies, one is able to read and write, doesn't get stuck, has enough knowledge and is able to stand on one's own feet. What I'm talking about is a universal standard, it is a fixed formula, just like mathematical formulas, 2 multiplied by 5 is equal to 10, not 11. When all this knowledge arises, one knows what other people are saying, one knows the objects that one looks at, there is just knowing and joy. It is insight, because one now has the eye that sees the Dhamma. It is fun to watch, whatever one looks at, one hits it on the spot. Both material and mental phenomena, inside as well as outside. Whatever happens to the body and the mind, one knows immediately, and one leaves it behind without hesitation. Before, when something would come in contact with the mind would ripple. Now the mind doesn't ripple, rather, the object that comes into contact with the mind is set free. When I was still a layman, I went to practice Dhamma at the Budayana forest, in Loi province. I had to use a wooden platform from a nearby monastery, and I bought a plastic sheet to make a roof. Tattered monks' robes were used as walls, because in July there is plenty of rain. As I was practicing, somebody told me that I should understand Rupa Nama, because he saw me practicing for a long time without understanding it. Some people said that they knew, just practicing for a week, and they knew Rupa Nama. But I practiced for 2 whole weeks and still didn't know it. I thought to myself, I really have to see it in my mind, I'm not going to just remember others' words or figure it out with my own thinking. That's how Luangpor Teean taught. He taught to practice and see it for oneself. Next, I thought, Luangpor Teean used to say that he had made large offerings to the monastery, including building a ceremonial hall, all by himself. But I am a poor man, I didn't do all that. I probably don't have a chance to realize the Dhamma. These thoughts made me feel inferior and doubtful. Then I thought, but I've done some good things, maybe not as much as him, but I've made merit, built a monk's hut, and I am not a bad person, I don't have any stains of wickedness. I've always been virtuous because my parents are Buddhists and taught me to do what is good, and that's what I've been doing all the time. Especially when I studied superstition, I had to keep precepts, I couldn't gamble. My character was like this. Reflecting like this, made me a bit proud of my past because I was not an evil person, but why didn't I know the Dhamma? I asked Luangpor Teean, are there any practitioners who don't get any knowledge after having practiced? Luangpor Teean said, that has never happened. It seems that I am the first one, because after 2 weeks I still don't know anything, I remarked. Luangpor Teean walked up to me and grabbed my hand. I said, you have made merit and made offerings, but I have never done as much of that as you, I guess I don't have the merit to know. He answered, never mind, don't worry. Are you practicing sincerely? I said, I really am, Luangpor. Luangpor Teean said, practice here for 1 month. How much money do you get for 1 month's work? I answered, I get 1,000 baht a month. In those days I was a hired hand, making doors and windows for houses. This was building work, skilled labor, and I would get at least 1,000 baht a month. Next he said, if you practice for 1 month and you don't get any knowledge, I will give you 1,000 baht, I really promise you that. But you have to practice sincerely. From then on, I was energized in practicing. Practicing in those days, I would sometimes get lost in criticizing certain monks, thinking that they didn't have the same virtue as me, because I saw them playing and joking. Sometimes, they told me to go and look for bamboo shoots or to climb a tree and collect fruits. I asked myself, is this called practicing Dhamma? It made me think about leaving. But having reprimanded them in my mind, I no longer looked at others. Instead, I only watched and listened to Luangpor Teean. I didn't pay attention to others and create a mess and a burden for myself. So, I made a firm resolution to build up awareness, to build up sati. After practicing Dhamma for less than 20 days, I had an experience and lots of knowledge arose. When practicing in the right way, it becomes as easy as rolling a boulder downhill. But when doing it wrong, it is like rolling it uphill. Doing it in the wrong way is just a burden, there are many things that one doesn't like, and then one goes and thinks about them. One is thinking, reasoning, liking and disliking like a madman, and this makes one not attain the Dhamma. Building up the quality of knowing, or awareness, is not something one can think up, rather, one has to practice in order to know. In the past I had been an occult healer, and had verses and chants. When I built up the quality of knowing, that stuff just dropped off. I didn't do anything about it, I wasn't the slightest bit reluctant to give it up. There was no more foolishness, delusion, attachment to rituals, and playing around with witchcraft and sorcery in my mind, from that moment onwards. I used to think that I was a magician, able to heal the sick. An invulnerability chant has to be recited until one feels that one's body swells up, and becomes so big that it squeezes against the walls, or until one perceives a razor blade as a blade of grass. Then one has reached the end of the recitation. To do this well, one has to recite often. Magic chants depend on recitation, they depend on training in psychic powers. Sometimes I would chase off ghosts, I would cut off their heads with a sword, making a loud sound. I've done that for many people. When I built up the quality of knowing, I stopped doing all that stuff. One day as I was practicing, Luangpor Teean came walking over and asked how I was doing. I answered him without being afraid of anything, I know Rupa Nama now. Luangpor Teean said, if you get understanding from practicing in this way, then do more of it. Try to keep up with thought, watching it. This refers to unintentional or sneaky thoughts. If no thoughts occur, then watch the movements of the body. Whenever thoughts arise, be in time to watch. Luangpor taught me to work with the mind, to watch both the body and the mind with awareness, to watch and see suffering, suffering of Rupa and of Nama, to watch and see physical and mental phenomena, and convention of Rupa and Nama. When proliferation arises, one shouldn't give it priority. One should do one's duty of watching the movements of the body and the thoughts in the mind. One shouldn't give attention to thoughts that come up by themselves. Build up awareness that is in time with the thoughts arising. When one knows the thoughts in time, one doesn't incline to go with the arisen thoughts. So, it is our duty to build up awareness. When one builds up more and more awareness, in the end it suddenly meets up with thought. It is as if one opens the door and collides with thought. At the moment a thought is about to come up, we are lying in wait at the door. As soon as the thought arises, whack, we know it in time. It's like a surprise, and the thought fails to establish itself. This makes one see how wild concoction is, sneak thoughts, and it makes one see the origin of suffering. This is not like ordinary knowledge, it appears in an electrifying flash. I definitely have seen thought clearly. Before, we got carried away with thoughts, sankhara, which are the cause of suffering. We wandered here and there with thought, and we got lost in it. One is not free because of thought. To give an example, a thought arises and one becomes afraid, one starts to think about something and one proliferates defilement and craving. We didn't see this clearly before. When I came to practice with Luangpor Teean, I clearly saw how bad mental formations are. It's like a dog chasing a deer, we were able to follow and keep up with the things that deceived. It is comparable to somebody who plays tricks, they have fun in deceiving people, but as soon as we see what they're doing, and we keep up with their tricks, we then know that it is nothing at all. They really can't deceive anyone who realizes what is going on. There are two kinds of thinking, namely, first, unintentional thinking. This is illusion, it makes one get lost, on thinking one is led along the wrong path. Second, intentional thinking, never mind about that, one deliberately thinks about something well, one makes use of thought and having finished thinking, that's the end of it. Intentional thinking is crystal clear, it makes one understand merit, demerit, and the nether realms, one experiences these things clearly. I can 100% guarantee that, by understanding like this, one closes the door to the lower realms. One can be said to be a human being. In the past I was still just a person, because I didn't see convention, I didn't see Rupa Nama. But when I could keep up with thought, I stopped being merely a person. I had more happiness than before, I no longer played about like before, it was as if I had reached the shore, to some extent. If one compares it to a trader, I was a trader in diamonds and got heaps of money. Previously, I was like a trader in kapok or fiber crops. What a mess, what a hassle. And I got only a little money, a little happiness and a little merit. I thought I would get merit from others or from doing this or that, just mind stuff. There is a shift that takes place in the mind on seeing thought. To go and proliferate as before makes one's hair stand on end. To see thought helps one to behave differently than before. I really saw it crystal clear. To suddenly meet up with thought makes an end to coarse behavior. Everything that is unjust disappears. It is like bowling, the pins all tumble over, one after the other. Suffering is comparable to fruits up in a tree. When we shake the tree just a little, the fruits fall down, but not all of them. Foolishness, crude forms of suffering and anger, desire and delusion are affected, but not a lot, they are just shaken up a bit. Being a human being means to be someone with virtue. When there is virtue, there is normality, there is peace. Samadhi refers to the mind that is in order. When there is order, there is no mess and the mind becomes tame. Wisdom means to know all around, to know how to solve things within oneself, to know how to liberate oneself and not to sink down, being caught up with all sorts of conditions, but to be free. This is how I knew, and later I understood other things as well, such as angels. To be an angel is to have a moral mind, not daring to act or think in bad ways. I understood Buddhism, and I understood the three characteristics of all conditioned phenomena, namely, that they are impermanent, without intrinsic value and not self. Seeing Rupanama, seeing the conditions of body and mind, and seeing all things as they really are, is like having a magic eye. One sees that all things are impermanent, it is like seeing the place to dispose of the conditions of body and mind, one used to cling to. The mind becomes clean because there is no rubbish lying about in it, there are no smuts of love, regret, anger, suffering, obtaining, losing, winning or failing. This state of mind is called, seeing the three characteristics. Merit is to have an upright mind. Religion exists within us. Evil has to be abandoned at the body, speech, and the mind. If one still thinks, talks and does bad things, to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by reciting a formula, is useless. I didn't know this before, I thought that thinking was something refined, that whatever one thinks, nobody sees it. But in seeing it I know that unintentional thoughts are gross, they are dirty, and because of that I don't dare to think. When one doesn't dare think, how is one going to talk and act? So whatever is bad, I don't dare do it, not even to think it. This is called being an angel because one is established in the morality of angels. The kind of angels that one can really meet and see are the angels that arise in the mind, that is, one is afraid of evil, one doesn't dare to perform what is bad. As for the conventional angels, they refer to kings and important people, who have happiness and ease, without much suffering. On reviewing the previous stages, from seeing Rupa Nama onwards, it appears as if Rupa and Nama encourage us, they don't leave us. The three characteristics don't leave us. They are like a stack of provisions, or reserve players at a sports event. In other words, they are a big army. Seeing the stages all the way through gives us encouragement. One knows, sees, and understands the three characteristics, and it is as if they keep following one continuously. To be an arahant, refers to the mind that is utterly pure. When one enters the stream, that leads to Nibbana, the angels come to praise one. It is only human beings that are able to reach the path, fruits of practice and Nibbana. Therefore, human beings are considered to be the uppermost beings. It says in the scriptures that being born as a human being is a great gain. In the state of being human, the mind really rises higher. It is not just a matter of having 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head on top of the shoulders. That is still not a sure thing. It might be a spook, a giant or a hungry ghost. But practicing up to this stage, one really is a human being. When one walks to the plane at the airport, there are certain conveniences. On walking to the door just opens up for us, no need to open it yourself. Going up, there is a conveyor that takes one's suitcases, one doesn't need to carry them oneself. A Brahma god doesn't have four faces, as some will have it, rather, this refers to the qualities of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. When I understood like this, it made me think of those who don't know yet. I wanted people to know and see. I thought of this and that person. I thought of my father has died. I thought of my mother. All right. I'm going to teach my mother. I'm going to teach my brothers and sisters. What I've been saying may not be all of it, but if one really studies and practices, one will know many things and doubt will come to an end. It will make one see right and wrong, this is called realization. One will shift from being a person to being a human being with morality. Training and practicing until there is realization, will give one sufficient understanding about angels, about Brahma gods, about virtue, firmness of mind, wisdom, religion, merit, demerit, and Buddhism. One won't have any doubts, even about such matters as visions, ghosts or whatever it may be. The mind will be steadfast, not attached to any ceremonies. Everything comes to a conclusion within oneself, and so one stops searching for teachers. The teaching, by the Buddha, that says to associate with the wise and not to associate with fools, refers to oneself, one's own body and mind, which are wise or foolish. To love one's parents means, not to lead oneself to do bad things and get into trouble. Respecting teachers isn't just a matter of bowing to them, rather, one should revere their goodness. Don't try to find angels outside of yourself, they exist inside us. The Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha exist within oneself. A good person is someone who respects him or herself. When one pays respects to a Buddha image, one doesn't bow to the cement, bricks, or stone, that is just convention. Know that to be externally reverential, one should have a noble one inside. That is to say, a moral mind, a supreme mind. There is an old saying, the malicious mind is a ghost, the righteous mind is a noble one. At one time, about 40 or 50 people came to practice with Luangpor Teean, lay people as well as monks. Some people had all sorts of reactions, some people cried. I've never had those kinds of problems. Even when some visions did arise, I'd see and understand it. It is like having eyes, one looks and one sees according to reality. For example, one sees mosquitoes swarming around, one sees a snake coming, one sees thorns, one sees an overgrown path in the forest, or one sees a cleared path. One sees similarly in the mind, one knows what to do, and so there is no more doubt anymore. No more doubt about the teaching of the Buddha and the noble ones, about what convention and ultimate reality is, about visions, about what tranquility meditation and insight meditation is. One has experienced it plainly and there is no wavering. One doesn't go and search anywhere else anymore, one has enough knowledge. Abandoning evil, and doing what is good, is really to be done right here. At our very body and mind. One sees the mind that stealthily thinks. It is full awareness that tells us so, it sums things up for us, that is sufficient knowledge and understanding. Once, I did some teaching together with somebody who taught a different style of meditation. That teacher taught to create an image in the mind. But the group of practitioners who had developed awareness, was aware and didn't think up a mental image, they didn't get attached to a sign. They weren't stuck on all kinds of ceremonies, such as the ceremony to cut off kama, by using cloth, incense, and other things. These types of rituals are finished with, they stopped doing them. They have stopped looking for teachers that teach one to know anything other than awareness, because the real thing is right here. One identifies with the qualities that one puts in one's mind. If you care for your children and love your husband or wife, then don't create suffering for yourself and don't be a bad person. If you are a bad person, you suffer. Your parents are worried, they have problems because of us. Loving one's children and wife is not just a matter of thought, rather, one should behave in a good way, don't be someone who makes trouble. All this depends on oneself, religion is within oneself. When we are good people, how could we do bad things and end up in prison? That there are such things as the law, prisons, police, the army, and weapons, is because there are bad people. If there were no bad people, why would we have to have those things? Why would there be soldiers and policemen? Why would there be prisons? If we behave well, we don't oppress ourselves, and how can we trouble others? May you really see and realize this. Some people with whom I used to practice together with, I don't know what they understood. They practiced as if they knew the Dhamma, but their actions, speech, and demeanor looked off. It compares to going to elementary school and not getting good marks, not being able to read. One is not allowed to go to the next class, one has to stay where one is, because one's actions indicate that there are still things that one doesn't know. This is called, not getting good marks, one doesn't find the way and so can't proceed. If one really finds the way, one doesn't back up. Just seeing the three characteristics, is enough to pass the grade. One doesn't get involved in conventional forms, one is able to liberate oneself in a good way. It makes one incline and flow in the direction of being without suffering. One practices continuously. It seemed as if practice was shortened, it was not as difficult as before. Before, it was as if the body moving was one thing, and the mind thinking, another thing. It seemed that the one who saw thought would pull things back and solve the problem. But now, I don't have to solve any problem, only just watching, and everything comes to an end. The state of watching means to watch whenever something arises, just watching and one passes onwards, continuously. So, I came to understand, I came to see that this is the path to overcome suffering, this is the living of the spiritual life. The state of watching is not stained by anything at all, because one doesn't get caught up, one just watches. And so, one is not involved, one is able to pass onwards all the time through seeing in a pure way. The state of neutrality means that one is not caught up in happiness or suffering. There is just watching, one sees happiness, one sees suffering, one sees knowing, one sees not knowing, one sees peacefulness, whatever happens, one sees all of it. One sees inside and outside oneself, not getting caught up. Even when people abuse, blame, or praise us, we just watch what happens. Whether it's cold, hot, or one is hungry, there is only just watching. This state of watching makes one extremely nimble, it makes one pass onwards. Having reached this point, one has a very high degree of agility. Like a car driving on a deserted road, there is no need to be careful. But when one gets to a road that is not deserted, a road where there are people, one is able to immediately use awareness and wisdom, one doesn't run away from society. Compare it to driving your car in the city, one knows which one the highway is, and which are the minor roads, one knows the red lights and the green lights, one knows the crossroads and one knows what's happening on the right and on the left. This makes for safety, this state of watching doesn't get stuck and no accidents occur. There is such a thing as mental traffic, for example, having thought something, there is concoction until a mood arises. But when awareness and wisdom are there, one passes it conveniently. Similar to a car passing, it's easy. There is no traffic to get stuck in, it's like a highway, freeway, or expressway. It's the same thing with training cows or buffaloes to pull a cart. Some cows that have been well trained, come walking over as soon as one raises the cart up, no need to force them, no need to tie them with ropes, no need to beat or whip them, they are ready to pull the cart home or to the barn. They are able to avoid stumps all by themselves and they know where to turn right or left. The state of watching sees. When one sees often, one becomes more and more experienced until one is a champion. Compare it to a sportsman or woman, who has played until he or she is skilled at what they do. Or an artist who has performed many times. A professional worker has to be skilled likewise, they must be able to use their tools to create a beautiful and artistic house. Developing awareness is the same. If one trains and practices a lot, one becomes so skilled that awareness turns into Mahasathi, full and automatic awareness. Talking in terms of power, Sathi has lots of power. It is similar to flooding water, that is able to sweep along the rubbish from the banks of a river or stream. The power of wisdom knowledge is the same. When there is lots of power, one doesn't have to make effort. It's comparable to a tractor, it clears the land completely. Wisdom knowledge is like that. For this reason, the things that are dirty, the things that are corruptions of the mind, that are stuck in one's character, until the attachment to them as being me, is as hard as a diamond, become as soft and gentle as silk, because purity of mind has arisen. The three fetters of 1. Self-view, 2. Doubt, and 3. Attachment to precepts and practices, are not just things in the scriptures, they exist in all of us. The 84,000 teachings in the Tripitaka, ancient Buddhist scriptures, exist in us, here. They are to be found in this fathom-long living body. The nature of our actions depends on our minds. One may be a spook, a giant, a devil, a hungry ghost, a human being, a person, an angel, or whatever, it all depends on our very minds. The state of watching and seeing doesn't get caught up, there is just watching and seeing continuously. In the end, self-view diminishes, that is to say, the ego diminishes. The state of watching continuously is the state of normality, therefore, virtue arises within one. It helps to destroy anger, desire, and delusion, which presently exist in us. Actually, those are the gross defilements, they are still there, but not fully, not 100%. A worldly person has 100% anger and gladness. When awareness has been developed, gladness and sadness gradually diminish. This indicates the quality of awareness. We both have moods of liking and disliking, wanting and not wanting. The state that clearly sees those moods indicates whether one is a noble one of low or high caliber. One can measure it with this. One shouldn't measure it by external forms or characteristics, such as whether one is ordained, how long one has been ordained, whether one is famous and has a title, which means in the world being this or that, that's not it. Rather, it's a matter of how level the mind is, how much does it go up and down. Is there much variation? If one still goes overboard with laughter when one is glad, it means that one has 100% gladness. This is called still being a worldly person. The state of seeing is like this. It doesn't get caught up in anything, but it is neutral, it is normal, and therefore, it is real virtue. To determine to observe precepts is external virtue, one looks after it, in order to live together in society, which is a good thing. As for the real training in virtue, it is the kind of virtue that melts and digests the defilements, so that the mind doesn't go up and down, because one sees them and so they can't remain. Doubt and attachment to rituals are abandoned, because one understands that everything is dependent on our actions, it is not an external matter. This state of watching, seeing, and not being caught up, is a formula, it is a guide in living one's life. It gives us this guidance, one doesn't have to recite or remember anything. The quality of buddho doesn't arise from reciting the word. Buddho means to know, to be awake and to have a joyful mind. In whoever the state of knowing, being awake and joy arises, that person has buddho in his or her mind. And it will protect and look after us, so that we don't fall into harmful states of mind. Just as the saying goes, the Dhamma will inevitably take care that a practitioner does not to fall into bad states. The Dhamma yields results, if one really knows and sees the way that should be known and seen. The more one studies, the more one sees clearly. Confidence will arise as well as deep devotion to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Noble Sangha. The state of realization and clear knowing is Vipassana, insight. So, insight is not about seeing colors and lights, heaven and hell, externally. Heaven and hell exist in our very minds. One shouldn't pray to angels, to come and help one in this and that way, that is appropriate for someone without a refuge, who hopes to find an external refuge in an illusory way. Being an angel means that one's mind has a sense of shame of wrongdoing. If everybody were to have this quality, there would be no need for prisons in our country, because everyone would protect themselves and no one would create suffering for others. So, seeing clearly in this way makes one abandon self-view, doubt and attachment to rites and rituals. It means that one turns around and solves problems within oneself. This state of watching makes one pay respects to the qualities of the Buddha, rather than to a golden image. It makes one pay respects to the characteristics of the Dhamma, rather than to books, and it makes one pay respects to the virtuous qualities of the noble Sangha, rather than to robes and a shaven head. The meaning of the word pra, monk, is an excellent person, someone with a good heart, that is to say he or she doesn't get angry, doesn't desire and doesn't get deluded. The kind of thoughts that say, he insulted me, I won't give in, don't exist in someone like that. There is just letting go, and understanding arises, clear seeing, until there is no anger. Getting and losing, happiness and suffering, praise and blame, are ordinary things in the world. Nobody can be their owner. And it is the same with sights, sound, smell, taste, bodily sensations and mental phenomena. They are things of the world, they belong to the world, they are not ours. Even sight, sound, smell, and taste have a worldly flavor to them. People don't know or understand it like this, and so they always have a sense of lacking something. For example, one is a slave of desire. The state of watching and seeing makes one feel satisfied, there is a sense of enough, there is no lack of anything, no shortage, and how are we going to suffer? Therefore, when there are virtuous qualities in all of us, we don't get deluded, we abandon evil, do what is right and our minds are pure. The state of watching helps to cut down on things and it makes us understand. It makes us able to overcome suffering. What it comes down to is, a handful of Dhamma. The Buddha once compared his teachings to a handful of leaves. So, understanding the Dhamma, is not something difficult for someone who has reached the state of watching. This is true regardless of whether one has studied or not, because attaining the Dhamma is not connected at all with studying. Rather, it is a matter of training oneself to let go of what is bad, to do what is good and to purify the mind. That is what Dhamma is. Awareness or the perfection of awareness is not to be found in books or scriptures, it exists inside us. Don't be afraid of the ghosts outside, the ghosts are in your mind. In the Sutta, Discourse, on Auspiciousness, the Buddha said, not to associate with fools, to associate with the wise, and to revere those that should be revered. These three things are the highest blessing. A fool here, doesn't refer to Mr. A or Miss B. Gamblers, flirters, people who go to bars and nightclubs, people who drink, etc., are called external fools. But the real fools are inside of us, they are our thoughts. If we think harmful thoughts, our harmful thoughts may lead us to anger, desire, or delusion, they may lead one to defilement and craving. What does it mean to associate with the wise? It means to have good thoughts in our minds. For example, when some problem arises, we let go and don't dwell on it. Never mind, it is just the way it is. This is a wise person. Trying to not have anybody tell us off, or blame us, is impossible. But if we have good thoughts and think in the right way, and we know how to let go, we associate with the wise. It doesn't mean to get attached to this teacher or that monk, or getting deluded to the physical form of the Buddha, as was the case with the monk Vakali, who kept following and staring at the Buddha. The Buddha saw that this monk was getting lost, and so he taught him that, whoever sees the Dhamma, sees me. The monk Vakali then determined to practice the Dhamma and finally, he realized the Dhamma. This is the way that I see, and understand this matter of not associating with fools and associating with the wise. One should see it broadly, in all its aspects. It is comparable to light that radiates outwards, that way one knows completely and all around. It is not a matter of sitting with eyes closed and knowing, but one knows at the time one's eyes are open. Wherever one goes, one knows as one is living one's life as usual, being aware at the same time. The Buddha said that, whoever is aware continuously is like someone who lives in comfort at home with one's parents, there is warmth, kindness, and one is safe. What I'm saying comes from my own experience in training myself. It may not be elaborated in detail, but when you really determine to practice you will have your own experience. You will know the taste of it yourself, and learn plenty of lessons. We must experience and see things for ourselves, we must let go ourselves, we must be liberated ourselves. Once we have a foundation we will find the path, this is a law of nature. The state of watching, the state of knowing or awareness, compares to being at home with our father and mother. Of course then we are safe, we're free from all possible dangers because our parents protect us. This befits the saying, Sati and Sampajanya are things that are of great assistance. Sati is recollection, or mindfulness, and Sampajanya is realization or full awareness. The state of watching is something superb, because there is emancipation, there is safety, there is cleanliness, purity appears, it is lofty virtue, lofty firmness of mind and lofty wisdom. The state of watching helps support us to understand the conditions of body and mind, to know convention as convention, to know the suffering of Rupanama, to know the disease of Rupanama. And so, a transformation takes place in the mind, one becomes a human being and one who is virtuous. Hapubpagatha punyatha means having done good things in the past. For example, yesterday or today we've done something good. The words in the past don't refer to before we were born, or a previous lifetime. In the past here means actions done earlier on, such as yesterday, last week, or last year. So if we have received good directions, the results will be good, and our minds will become more and more pure. The mind of a virtuous person goes back to nature. His or her body and mind are in a state of normality. The process of knowing more and more takes us to the stream of liberation. It doesn't flow backwards, it goes in the direction of the path and fruits of practice, it goes towards being a noble individual, namely a stream enterer, a once returner, a non-returner, and an arahant. The state of knowing is like a warrior who is backed up with support, and so keeps enlarging his territory until he is in charge and has power. Therefore, wild behavior can't remain, the army of the Dhamma is there. It is like a warrior who is victorious, there is awareness. The state of watching and seeing is the victory of the warrior. One practices right at this point. Nothing can obstruct, there are no enemies that can resist, and so one is fluent. The state of watching makes the cankers of sensuality, being and not knowing, unable to remain. These cankers are refined defilements that ferment in the subconscious, until they become habitual. The state of watching stops the enemies, or if they don't stop, they'll dry up. It is like custard apples, some stay on the tree, all shriveled up. The enemies, defilements, surrender and don't fight anymore. The quality of knowing makes us watch concoctions in a dignified way, one is not a servant of thoughts anymore, as one was before. When proliferation starts to come up, begins to stir, the thoughts will stop when the quality of knowing sees it. It will just give up completely. When there is realization, there is nothing that can deceive. Wherever there is suffering, one is able to dig it all up. It's similar to water and oil, even a little bit of oil will always float on top of water. The Dhamma is the same, it is always on top of what is not Dhamma. This is a law of nature. Suffering, again, is the same, it cannot be on top of non-suffering. One could compare suffering with water and non-suffering with oil. I'm just comparing all the time, but when you really practice you will see clearly and have realization for yourself. There won't be any suffering and you won't think about suffering, because you regard it as unclean. Just like someone who has clean clothes on, how can they let dirty things soil it? In case something soiled it, they would brush it off immediately. It is as if in the past we were dirty. That's why we let anger and suffering stay with us for days on end. We had never met the intrinsic purity and cleanness of the mind. But when we discover the cleanness and purity of the mind, we no longer allow dirty things to be there. The suffering of clinging to the ego is a refined kind of dirtiness. Originally we didn't know that, but as soon as we really know that this is dirty, we pass through and overcome it. In this way, we're able to erase the ego and make it fade out. This state of watching leads to justness, and when justness arises, one has a proper standard, one takes it as a principle and a guideline or compass for living one's life. The state of watching and seeing makes us cross over the cankers of sensuality, being and ignorance, or whatever states are the cause for wanting to be and have. The mind is liberated continuously. In the scriptures it is mentioned that, a stream enterer and once returner, first and second stages of enlightenment, are people who still get reborn, that is to say, after death they are reborn in order to strive to be an arahant, fully enlightened one, in the future. But I understand the word rebirth to mean thought, interest, or whatever causes interest. When one has overcome that, one doesn't go back and think about things many times. For example, the eye sees a form or the ear hears a sound. As soon as one perceives it in one way or another, one reaffirms it, and thinks about it again and again until, for example, craving and lust arise. For a non-returner there is only one life, this one, which refers to thoughts that sneak in just once, and they won't go back to think about old stuff. They have realization and power. Having thought once, it fades, they don't return to it, and so there is no rebirth. The word birth doesn't mean being born from mother's womb. That kind of birth happens only once, everybody knows that. But being born here, is the birth and death of Namarupa, in other words, the endless arising and passing away of the feeling of self. The Buddha said, "Before I attained insight knowledge, I wandered around through samsara, the round of transmigration, for countless lifetimes. I searched for the house builder, that is to say, craving, the thing that creates being. Being born is suffering each time." The words countless lifetimes stand for the arising and passing away of Namarupa. The collected birth stories of the Bodhisattva, a being striving for Buddhahood, refer to this. It doesn't mean that the Buddha was born as a rabbit or whatever in previous lifetimes, but there is nothing wrong with that explanation. The birth of a non-returner is a thought arising, which they immediately leave behind and annuls, so that nothing remains. It doesn't have value for him or her, and no karma is created. Such a one is not a servant of thought, they are free. They relate to things as being me or mine, only very little. Those things drop off. We discover and see these things without anybody telling us. It is the quality of knowing that tells us. It informs us of what is right and what is wrong, all by itself. One really sees clearly. The four jhana, meditative absorptions, have various factors. The first jhana, for example, has 5 factors. Jhana are hard to understand, one has to see them for oneself. One is capable of generating them, they make one get stuck because of their attraction, they give one a sense of happiness which is called worldly happiness. But the happiness that is beyond the world is without allurement. When the state of seeing arises, the mind becomes more and more liberated, and it leads to ultimate purity. A change takes place, namely, one is released from all kama. The words me, and to see, are separated from each other. There used to be always me, deep down there was still a self in the mind, but after practicing fully they become separated, and can't be connected again. It is as if form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness drop off and shatter like a bottle or a glass, they become unusable. At this stage of practice it is necessary to have a teacher. Let me tell you some of my experiences about this level of practice. That day after the midday meal, I didn't get up from my seat. I kept sitting until all the other practitioners had got up. Luangpor Teean saw me sitting and asked me, "What's up?" I told him what results had come in my practice. He said, "You're a fool. When those things drop off and are separated, why don't you come back to awareness? Then I understood what Luangpor Teean meant, when he would teach that there is inevitably knowledge, meaning final knowledge, when the mind is liberated. When I got back to my hut, I put the kettle and my cup down, feeling proud of myself. After a little while, it happened again. When I looked right at the spot, I understood that when the mind is liberated, there must be knowledge of that fact. These things depend on each other. It really is the state that is beyond birth, aging, sickness, and death. It is like the five khandha, form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, fail to work. In the past these five things diligently performed their duties, but now, they dropped off, shrunk up and stopped altogether. They were ready to return to nature. But one's life must go on, and so one must keep being aware continuously. Whenever one forgets or gets lost, one should come back to awareness. When one practices in the right way, it cannot be otherwise. Having come to this point, it made me think back to my parents. It was worthwhile that they raised me. Their son was born in order to reach this final goal. This point really is 100% nature, one really is beyond birth and death. It is like Ajahn Buddhadasa, a very wise and famous teacher from the south, says, dying before death. The ego or sense of self dies before physical death occurs. If we regard practicing Dhamma as a sport, it is a sport that doesn't die because there is nothing that is born, ages, gets sick and dies. This is how I understand and know it. Anybody can find and see it in the same way. It is not limited by one's nationality or language, and it has nothing to do with having studied or not. Determined to practice. If you are aware of raising your arm, that's good enough. This is the excellent path, it really is the number one path, it is the way to understand one's life. I have trained myself like this, trained until the final goal. What I'm saying is not based on just thought, but I've seen that this is a law of nature. My words may not be exactly in accordance with academic learning, don't make anything out of it, that it is right or wrong in this and that way. Don't use reason to contradict things, even though that may be right, rather, take these words as advice to study, to know, and see. May whoever has knowledge and vision about this, help to spread it out, not in order to oppress anyone, but to help bring about confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, so there may be firm conviction that, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha really exist. A sincere practitioner will get results, he or she will really know and see, and will really get rid of suffering in this lifetime. It is the genuine norm of life, it is the essence of friendship. Nothing changes, there is just straightness. May your life culminate in this point, and see that your life is just processes and conditions. Processes means, the body has to eat and go to the toilet, it has to lie down and sleep, it has to talk, these things have to be performed according to worldly conventions. Use your life in the ordinary way, like this, don't be angry or suffer until you die. Teachers in the past used to say, don't think that it is this or that person, who is talking about the Dhamma, don't have faith in the person who talks, and don't write them off either. These days, the faith of Buddhists is rather poor. People tend to have faith in this teacher or that Luangpor, and go to an extreme. But as soon as something happens to shake their confidence, they are heartbroken and disappointed. This is not right. We should have confidence in the Dhamma, we should use the Dhamma to develop the quality of our lives. Don't be attached to my teacher and my Luangpor, because that kind of faith doesn't lead to progress, rather, it is faith that makes one shrink back. When you understand like this, experiment with practice and take your actions as the criterion. When you do that and you see results, there will be confidence. It is not that one has faith because someone says the right things, faith because of someone's character, disposition, and demeanor. This kind of faith is dangerous, because it is not the confidence as was taught by the Buddha. At one time, after the Buddha had expounded the Dhamma, he asked Sariputta, the monk who was his chief disciple, "Do you believe what I'm saying?" Venerable Sariputta replied, "No, I don't. The monks who were sitting there all criticized Venerable Sariputta, saying, he doesn't even believe the Buddha, and they protested in the midst of the meeting. Next, the Buddha asked Venerable Sariputta, how do you see things? Venerable Sariputta respectfully addressed the Buddha, saying, I do not believe the Master, because what you have elucidated I know, see, and have realized already. Therefore I do not have any doubt on this matter, and there is no need to believe anybody anymore. Then, the Buddha spoke to the monks. Take Venerable Sariputta as your example. And so, one should experiment and practice with teachings, until one is Dhamma. If one still has anger and suffering, it means one is unable to solve the problem. Anger and suffering are not selves, but it is us who get lost. If we didn't get deluded, there would be no anger and no suffering. Only two things exist in our lives, namely, knowing and delusion. Do we spend more time with knowing or with delusion? We have to reflect on this for ourselves. If we still stay with delusion, we'll have to experience suffering and anger, for example, that's only natural. If we stay with the quality of knowing, we won't have anger or suffering. How can we stay with knowing? I have a method for all of you to try out, study and practice with. I'm not just telling you stories. I'm able to arrange a place and food for you, you don't have to pay for anything. This is because there are people with faith, who have offered money for food, for people who are interested to come and practice. In 1 year, as much as $1, in 1 month about $100. To lead retreats is my job, which I do fully, as skillfully as I can. I will be there as your friend. This age is the golden age. The Buddha, the Dhamma, the Noble Sangha, the paths, the fruits of practice, and Nibbana, really exist. You can experience them in your life. If you are aware, it means that you have the sprout of enlightenment. The Buddha is not separate from awareness, this is the sprout of enlightenment, that will grow up later on. May all of you be assured that you really are able to discover the truth in your life. To sum up, training oneself means to train in developing awareness. Awareness is the standard. It has the highest effectiveness, up to the point that one is able to reach the state of being the watcher. Awareness makes the mind pure, it is the path, it is the whole of the practice. Someone who is aware has achieved being the watcher in the right way. As it says in the scriptures, the final instructions of the Buddha. As long as bhikkhus live in the right way, the world will not be void of arahants. Don't think of this matter as being very difficult for you, because you're able to do it. You're able to be it. When one lives in the right way, one doesn't get caught up following one's proliferating thoughts. Instead there is neutrality, no gladness and no sadness. The state of watching takes one to this point, the point where there is no happiness and no suffering, no love and no hate, no like and no dislike. On reaching this state, one is beyond the world, it is called Lokuttara. As for the word Lokiya, in or of the world, it means that one has a sense of self because of one's concoction, there is like and dislike, one goes for happiness and suffering, and one takes on gladness and sadness. If one practices in the right way, the mind will settle by itself. Living in the right way doesn't mean that one has to stay in a forest, but if one has continuous awareness, it is called living in the right way. It is not necessary to go off to the forest, to sit with eyes closed and walk in a very concentrated way, that's not it. It's just a matter of being determined and attentive, of making sati sampajanya constant, there is no need to implore somebody else to come and help one. One practices by oneself, one is aware oneself, one reminds oneself, one solves problems oneself, and one will live without suffering. To give you all a blessing, I would like to say, may you know anger for the last time, may you know suffering for the last time. Don't be angry until you die, don't suffer until you die, because that is not a supreme kind of life, rather, it is punishing yourself. Polishing life with Dhamma. Luangpor Teean spent 5 months at a monastery in the state of New York, in 1994, and sent a letter tape to monks in Thailand which was published, and is translated here. Let me entrust my friends with Dhamma. With the word friends, I don't mean people of the same age group, who all like each other. What I mean is friends in birth, old age, sickness, and death. Regardless of whether we like each other or not, we are all friends in this regard. The atmosphere here at Juangyuran Monastery, Carmel, NY, is very good. It is a big forest monastery, shady, cool and peaceful, with all kinds of big and small creatures. I meet deer every day. Yesterday, I saw a mother with young twins. Lovely. They walked up to me, as I sat still. They passed me by, about 8 meters away. I didn't make a move. They came quite close and watched me. They seemed astounded and stamped their feet. It was good fun. The weather is nice and cool, it is comfortable. The forest is big, all just big trees. It is extremely suitable for meditation. I have never come across a place as suitable as this one. When I think about practicing, I do think about my friends. In Thailand, that means Khong Ka Mountain Monastery, and Akarliko Forest Garden, which are places that are used for practicing meditation. The foremost knowledge of human beings. The knowledge of meditation is an important knowledge, it is the foremost knowledge of human beings. If we human beings don't study about meditation, our life does not have value and there will be problems throughout our lives. Our lives as human beings are the results of the past. Much information has been accumulated, it's a complete mess. There is both right and wrong, foolishness and delusion in the body and the mind. This is because our body is the result of the past, the result of our life in the past. Using body and mind in the wrong way compares to a second-hand car. Our body and mind are just like a second-hand car that has been used for a long time, it has been damaged all over and is in a state of bad repair. Being aware is like repairing it, like cleaning away the past and returning it to its normal state. Awareness is like a garage for fixing up life, and bringing the body and mind back to normal. This is called meditation. Meditation is making things better, it doesn't mean reciting a mantra, meditation is fixing things up. Making the body and mind better, more normal. Whatever is not normal is cleaned up and discarded. What remains is normality, this is meditation. The method of meditation. The method of developing meditation, especially the method of developing awareness as taught by Luangpor Teean, is a way that is straight, it is a shortcut, it is extremely appropriate. I have never heard of anybody teaching like this. Previously, I studied all about meditation, I practiced with closed eyes and recited a mantra, until the mind became still and peaceful. I would sit in peace for 1 or 2 hours, I was attached to the peace and happiness. Sometimes, visions would appear, sometimes I would use magical verses or imagination to help the meditation. I played with these visions and imaginations but I was attached to the peace and happiness. I valued it highly and cherished it a lot, I dearly loved the peacefulness. Wherever I went, I would think about it. When I was in the fields, I would think about my meditation room, I wanted to sit in peace. Some days I really had an appetite to meditate, as soon as I got home I would have dinner and go into the meditation room, before I had sat down properly, I was already peaceful. It would happen in an instant. It was bliss. I practiced like this for over 10 years. I was stuck. I thought that I was doing the right thing, but when I met Luangpor Teean, I was told to sit with eyes open, to make movements, to be aware and to be diligent in knowing. A strange teaching. Sometimes, I couldn't accept it and I didn't like to make movements with the hands and arms, it wasn't as good as sitting there in peace. When I first trained myself with Luangpor Teean, there was conflict and I had lots of reasons for it too. But as soon as I determined to train, and practiced a lot, things became clear. This is building up the quality of knowing, it's not thinking, it's not sitting there being peaceful. The eyes are open, so one is aware. Be aware a lot. This is a straight method, it goes straight to awareness. Awareness is the development of the Dhamma, and this is the way to have lots of awareness. This has nothing to do with reciting words inwardly. Meditation is to build up much awareness. To develop means to do it a lot, to have a lot of awareness. This is how I understand it. Before there was peace, I used the method of recitation, but recitation, whatever word it may be that one uses, is not meditation. Real life is the present. Meditation means to be diligent in knowing directly, in a straight way. The things to be known are there. The body, for example, is an object to be known. Why is it that we must always focus on knowing? Because our minds instinctively rush out ahead and rush backwards, there is just future and past. For this reason we create movements in the various postures, all the time, in order to be now. Now is what real life is. Real life is now. So we practice with that. Go inwards with the quality of knowing. Directly and straightly. Know meticulously. Make it very clear, don't let there be vagueness. Make the posture that you're in clear, break it up in stages, moment by moment, so that it becomes clear. It is similar to training in writing. At first one writes the A and the B precisely and clearly, in detail. First, one should write the characteristics of the letters clearly. One shouldn't start off writing indistinctly. This is the same, creating movements, creating a form can be watched clearly, it is not blurred. When we watch the breath, sometimes, we fall asleep, it's easy to lose oneself in it. And closing the eyes makes matters even worse. It is not natural to close the eyes, and so one drops off to sleep even faster. In making movements with the arms and hands, we don't close our eyes. As with learning how to write, the movements are extremely meticulous. The knowing enters into the movements, in the most direct and straight way. On watching the body one sees the mind. On watching thought one sees Dhamma. At first, we talk about watching the body, but we'll see something else too, feelings. With eyes closed one won't see them, or one will see them indistinctly, not clearly, and one won't understand them. But when we look and watch, we will see clearly. We will see pain, tiredness, and the pleasant and unpleasant feelings of the body. These are feelings that exist. So we see feelings by watching the body. When one continues to watch, one will see the thinking mind. The mind does exist. By watching the body, one goes on to see the mind thinking. And when one sees thought, one sees mental phenomena, Dhamma, that arise from thinking. One sees thought that cooks things up, rather than just thinking, and that's the end of the matter. One sees that these are Dhamma that arise in the mind. This is how wholesome and unwholesome states arise, cleverness and foolishness. One sees this by oneself, one sees that these things really exist. Altogether there are 4 kinds of things. Instead of watching the body and only seeing that much, one comes to see feelings, the mind, and mental phenomena arising. One sees things that are there and exist in their own right. Seeing through thinking, seeing through knowing, and seeing through discovering. Before, I didn't know, I thought that all those things were I. We tend to think that all of it is self, that they are mine. And so, one gets involved, one gets stuck, one is deluded and one relates to things in the wrong way. All of it is I. But as soon as one really sees it, one sees that these things are nature, they are things that exist in nature. As soon as one sees that, one puts things down, right there. In this way, things just pass by. It is as if it is no longer one's business anymore, to get involved in it. One sees reality, things that really exist. Feelings really exist, they have their own ways. The mind that thinks is one thing, that which knows and sees is another thing. Whatever arises in the mind, that is a pair with the mind, whatever phenomena, wholesome or unwholesome, those things do exist, and one sees them, one discovers and sees, one suddenly meets them. Having discovered them, One passes them now. We can say what they are, that they are this and that, and we can pass on. We watch with awareness, we watch continuously, we watch the body continuously, we are aware of the body incessantly. When we watch, we see. Sometimes, we watch the body and we see thought. The movements are one thing, thoughts going out, are another thing, and awareness is still another thing. When one looks, that's the way it is. It is comparable to there being three separate things: 1. Awareness, 2. The movements, 3. Thoughts going out. When one watches a lot, one sees, one's vision becomes sharp. The state of watching develops and grows, it knows and it sees. It is quick, swift, it keeps up with things. This kind of eye knows in time, it knows in time what's happening. One keeps watching, and the awareness that is abreast of things suddenly makes a discovery. It is seeing through discovering, not seeing through thinking or seeing through knowing. Seeing through knowing and seeing through discovering is different. Seeing through thinking is far apart, seeing through knowing comes a bit closer, but seeing through discovering meets things in an immediate way. The posture of sitting and the movements we make, are solid objects, they are rupa, rupa dhamma, physical phenomena. What orders the body to get up, sit down, walk and move, are nama dhamma, mental phenomena. In other words, it is the mind that knows things. In actuality, these things are nothing other than just the body and the mind. Body-mind, rupa nama. The words body and mind are limited, but the words rupa nama are terms that indicate mastery. There is mastery just as with learning how to write. At first, one just knows how to write the A, the B, and so on, but when one continues to study, one becomes proficient, one can put the letters together and words are formed, it becomes language that can be used. This is the same, one sees rupa dhamma and nama dhamma. There is just this much. The body, from the top of the head to the soles of the feet, is a lump. As for nama, it can't be touched but it has power, it orders the body around to do this and that. It is the boss, the body is the servant. This is an old saying, in Thailand, that we all know, but we don't see it through discovering. When we do see it, having discovered it for ourselves, the truth is revealed, nama dhamma are the boss, they are in charge and tell rupa what to do. We see this now. The dhamma, in Thai pronounced in the same way as the word tum, which means to do, refers to nature that exists by itself. It is as it is. As for the word tum, rupa and nama, they act, they do good and evil, it is because of this body and mind. If the mind thinks in good ways, there will be good actions, if it thinks bad things, it will do those things, it will link up with rupa. If the mind thinks bad thoughts, the body becomes bad as well, and it turns into evil. If the mind thinks good things, it will order the body to do good things. The result is wholesome and meritorious. One sees now that the cause, the principle, the foundation, is to be found here. Good and bad actions are rooted here. One sees that it is like this. One becomes clever and skilled in this way. It is as if one is told something, as if something is revealed, it is as if something opens up, and one can look inside. The nature of people's lives is like this, it is right here. Life is just this much. Whoever it may be, men, women, whatever nationality, life is just body and mind, or rupa and nama. Doing good and doing evil comes from this point. Rupa dhamma, changing conditions. This much is still not enough, one will still see more deeply. One sees that rupa dhamma are nature, the nature of rupa is to be formed as a solid lump, according to nature. There are changing conditions in rupa, such as heat, cold, pain, and tiredness. Before, we used to regard these things as feelings, but now, we see sharper than that. Now, we don't just see them as feelings, we see them as changing conditions. There are plenty of conditions of the body, hunger is one of them. They are conditions, changing conditions of rupa. If there are no conditions of rupa, then those things cannot remain. Nothing will be left of them. Both heat and cold, for example, are signs that indicate dangers for the body, so that the problem will be solved. It must protect itself. This happens by itself. When rupa and nama interact, sometimes there is something wrong, and nature tells of the dangers. When it is hot, one goes in the shade. When it is cold, one gets a blanket or makes a fire. When hunger arises, one finds something to eat. But sometimes there is hunger, and it is not just hunger. Something, which is a matter of rupa, turns into suffering. A condition of rupa becomes suffering, and it turns into a personal matter. I am hungry. Nama Dhamma, changing conditions. Nama is the same, it is the mind, which is a part of nature. The nature of nama is the nature of the mind, it is like that. But there are certainly a lot of conditions of mind, thoughts, etc. They are called cetasika, things that arise with the mind. The mind itself isn't anything, but it thinks this way and that, it knows this and that. Sometimes things arise because of thought. Defilement, craving, lust, anger, desire, delusion, happiness, suffering, like, and dislike, which are conditions of mind, arise through concoction. They are conditions of nama that exist. These things are related, they are connected. Before, we thought that all those things were self. Anger is me, happiness is me, suffering is me. But in reality they are changing conditions of nama. As soon as we see this, we have a foundation, we have a base, and there is normality. Before, those things were problems, our bodies and minds were the results of problems, of misunderstanding. As soon as one understands, the state of normality arises. The beginning of wisdom. One sees the stream of Dhamma, of normality, there is realization, there is wisdom. To know like this, is a level of wisdom. It is like turning up something that was overturned, or opening something that was closed. One really sees Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma clearly. This wisdom spurs us on to watch and see all the time. This stream of wisdom informs us. It is comparable to going to the airport. When one goes to the plane, everywhere doors open automatically, and the footpaths are convenient. The stairs roll up or down, no need to do anything, it is comfortable. Going to the toilet, the water starts to flow as soon as one sticks out one's hands in the sink. It is convenient. This kind of wisdom is similar, it urges one on to watch and see, and it becomes easy and convenient in line with the amount of wisdom one has. Just watching the body makes one see. The eyes are sharp, they have been developed. Just like an artist, one watches something and that's the end of it, finished. One sees right and wrong straight away. Sometimes, even before one sees it, it has ended already. It is powerful, it has power. It is a level of wisdom knowledge. Just doing this much, and wisdom knowledge arises. One is able to clearly know and penetrate things, by practicing like this. Seeing suffering, throwing off a heavy burden. Keep watching the body with awareness, and there will be progress in the development of awareness. Awareness will see the suffering of Rupa and Nama. Rupa is a lump of suffering, one must breathe, one must swallow saliva, one must lie down and sleep, one must get hot and cold, one must eat, and one must go to the toilet. This really is suffering of Rupa, it is a lump of suffering. One awakens to suffering and has pity on Rupa. Before, I was addicted to cigarettes. Wherever I went, I carried cigarettes with me, I always had a cigarette in my mouth. When I saw suffering, I had compassion for Rupa, smoking just dropped off. To breathe in and not to breathe out is suffering, to breathe out and not to breathe in is suffering, to eat and not go to the toilet is suffering. This really is the suffering of Rupa. How could one add more on top of that, by making it do this and that? The hands can't stay still, they restlessly move about. This makes one see suffering, a lump of suffering. I felt so sorry for Rupa that tears flowed. How did it manage to survive through these last 30 years? Before, I really didn't know all this. On seeing like this, some parts of suffering just dropped off. It is like shaking a fruit tree, a lot of fruits will fall down easily, but others don't come down, one has to pick them or use a long pole. There was still suffering, comparable to being in debt $100, and one has already paid off $70 to $80. Or compare it to carrying a weight of 100 kilograms, and one loses at least 70 kilo. The parts of suffering that dropped off really had an effect, it really was the stream of liberation from suffering. Concord between Rupa and Nama. This kind of wisdom sees Rupa and Nama, it sees the suffering of Rupa and Nama. The suffering of Nama is to think and feel sad. It refers to worry and anxiety. The suffering of Rupa is similar to that of Nama. I didn't know this before, I used to take on suffering, the more I would grasp onto it. Suffering would stay with me the whole day, sometimes a few days. I would create it with thought, I would think to myself, he insulted me, he always does that, I'm not going to give in, and so on. These kinds of thoughts are like rubbish, they are stains in the body and the mind. They are the results of information, that is not to one's liking. Nama is not being used properly. The results are no good. Nama acknowledges wrong information. It is comparable to a second-hand car, that is full of dents made by collisions. In the mind, there are stains of love, of hate, of happiness, of suffering, of getting, and of losing. There only seem to be stains and marks. As soon as I saw the suffering of Nama, I felt compassion. I saw with wisdom that I wasn't using the mind in the right way. There is a poisonous snake in the mind that makes trouble for the body, and the body creates trouble for the mind. But when awareness arises, there is concord, there is a sense of neutrality between them. Actually, a lot of harmony arises between body and mind. Body and mind no longer oppress each other, there are no more problems. Now, I know. There is realization. I see the suffering of Rupa and Nama, and the next stage is to see the disease of Rupa and Nama. The disease of Rupa refers to sickness, pain, fevers, and dangers of the body. The disease of Nama refers to impurities of the mind, craving, etc., that defile the mind and make it dirty. The disease of defilement, of craving, of happiness, of suffering, of love, and of hate, kill one, that is to say, they kill the normality of mind. This is the way it is. When I saw things like this, it was as if I was cured from a disease, just as if I went to the doctor with a stomachache, and took medicine for it. It really was like that. Seeing like this made me overcome and be liberated from problems. Knowing Rupa and Nama acting, religion is the individual. Then I understood that the actions of Rupa and Nama are good, because of this Rupa and Nama, they perform bad actions because of this Rupa and Nama. Whether it is right or wrong depends on this Rupa and Nama. And I understood religion is the individual. An individual means, a body and a mind. People from all nationalities have a body and a mind. Religion is the person. A person acts in a good or a bad way through using Rupa and Nama. One abandons evil with Rupa and Nama. Religion is your life. If one still acts, speaks and thinks in bad ways, one may recite the formula of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami etc., but one won't be a religious person. This is just religion according to registration, one hasn't yet experienced what real religion is. I understood things like this. Oh, real religion means the individual. Religions teach people to do good and to refrain from evil, this is what religion is. Knowledge enters into this, it is like a stream. One keeps reviewing things, such as Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma. One sees the conditions of Rupa and Nama, whatever arises with Rupa, is a condition of Rupa, whatever arises with Nama, is a condition of Nama. They are not permanent, they are rubbish. Before, I grasped them, grabbed hold of them, I clung to conditions as being self, heat was self, cold was self, hunger was self. Before, I took those things and made them into a problem, I made all those things into suffering. Actually, it is good to be hungry, one should be thankful to hunger. Heat is the same and so is cold. If there was no hunger, things would become impossible, one would die. Before, I took it to be suffering, but when I knew like this, I felt grateful. This is not a matter to suffer over, it is just as it is. One sees the conditions of nama in the same way, anger and suffering are things to throw out. Seeing the three characteristics, one sees that those things are not permanent, one sees the three characteristics. Seeing the three characteristics is like having a magic eye. The magic eye arises, and the three characteristics appear like a garbage bin. The conditions of rupa and nama are like rubbish that one throws in the rubbish bin. This is the way it is. If you don't see this yet, then remember this, so that you will be able to use it when the time comes. When there is anger, then regard anger as impermanent, likewise with suffering, suffering in the mind is not permanent. Throw them in the rubbish bin. Deposit them with the three characteristics, hand them over to the three characteristics. Before, there was lots of rubbish all over the place, it was the result of the past, it was second-hand stuff. When one throws these things away, it becomes cleaned up. On seeing what religion is, it is like being liberated from this mess. All this accumulated stuff gradually drops off. This is really the way it is. One sees that religion is the individual, and one sees that the three characteristics are not just concepts in a book, one sees them in the body and the mind. The three characteristics are not mere words, one can't explain them. The words to see, point to actually seeing things that really exist. On seeing, one is liberated, it is similar to having a shower, one becomes really clean and pure. How do you feel when you haven't had a shower yet? It feels sticky and messy, doesn't it? But when we've had a shower, dry ourselves and we put on new, clean clothes, we feel clean, light, and pure, we experience what it is like to be clean. This is what it's like. Convention, conventional norms. Let me entrust the Dhamma to my friends, really practice and purify yourself. Keep seeing, keep watching. I don't mean watching with the eyes. Keep practicing with the movements of the body. We do walking meditation and the rhythmic meditation. We keep knowing, we keep watching. We have to practice with the body and the mind in order to see religion. We continuously watch and we will see, things will reveal themselves. It is as if a door opens for us and we can see. One sees convention, conventional norms. There is both physical and mental convention. Material things, fields, wife, husband, and children and so on, are material objects, solid things. This kind of convention, we might call, true according to convention. Mental convention is thought that gives value to things, as good, not good, likable, not likable, etc. We assume things, to be like this or that, and we take convention too serious. The world is full of convention. We live in convention. Our whole life is convention. Fame and titles, material objects, possessions, houses, and whatever it may be, it is convention. We assume this and feel brave, we assume that and we are afraid, we even get angry because of convention. It is a big mess. There is so much of this convention. Objective matter, ultimate meaning, and changing conditions. There is what can be called objective matter, ultimate meaning, paramatha, and changing conditions. In and outside of oneself. Trees, mountains, the earth, the sky, and the weather, are examples of the external. We create them through convention. Originally, they are just nature, and then we go and assume them to be this and that. Internally, there are suppositions of flesh, skin, hair, and so on. The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and their interactions with form, sound, smell, taste, etc., are a kind of objective matter. Both internally and externally, there is objective matter, ultimate meaning, and changing conditions. Many of them are connected with living beings and their lives, the world is full of them. This is what one realizes and comes to know, one understands and sees convention. Before, I depended on thought to create magical verses, to create what is good, what is wrong, and I even created merit by using thought. In the past, I created all merit from outside, by thinking. Sometimes I would think to get something good from other people, or from material things. I took refuge in external things, such as charms and talisman. I would do good actions and make merit depending on others, thinking that others would be able to give me merit, believing that to do like this and that would be meritorious. It's just thought. It's convention. The various conditions and magical chants are, nothing but, convention. I didn't know this before, but when I understood convention, all this magical stuff lost its allure. Before, as a magical healer, I used to teach people to depend on me, but now I must look after myself. One does what is good and what is bad by oneself. I don't get lost, convention doesn't fool me anymore. Now, for me, all words, all abuse, is just convention, praise as well as blame. It is convention that people use, but we go and take it serious. When those things are on top of us, they can control our minds. As soon as I understood this, I suddenly felt so light. This knowledge is very expansive, it is like something opening up and seeing the scenery. One watches and one really sees, on seeing the truth the mind becomes good. It's not just gladness, it is goodness. The expressway, the freeway. Sitting here, a deer comes up to me. It is watching me. The weather is just great at Carmel, USA. The atmosphere is good, the state of watching is fluent, it is very convenient. One watches all the way from the beginning. One sees, starting with the body and then the feelings. It is an eye, a magic eye, it watches and watches. It is a magic eye indeed. The beginning stages are supportive, they are like cheerleaders that back one up, it makes things easy and convenient. It is as convenient as the roads in America. It is like a freeway, a highway, there are no traffic jams, one can always keep going, one passes easily and doesn't get stuck. These freeways are very big, 8 lanes on each side and they don't drive slowly, as in Thailand. At least 100 kilometers an hour. But one has to be careful of wild deer, they put up signs, watch out for wild deer crossing the road. One day, as I was sitting in a car going to Long Island, I saw nothing but forest for 3 hours, and I saw a car that had collided with a deer. They've made signs of a wild deer crossing the road, they don't have signs of cows and buffaloes, as in Thailand. Their freeways sure are big and wide. If one practices in the right way, it is convenient. It is right view. When right view arises, everything becomes easy. One can go on, go through. It is like that from the beginning, one steps on the right path and things become fluent, the mind is in a good state. To have the mind in a good state is to have merit. To experience the good mind, the light mind, the mind that sees reality, this is what merit is all about. Seeing like this is to close the door to the bad destinations, one is no longer foolish, one has become smart. Why get angry? One knows now. One doesn't get caught up in bad states of mind, one just watches. As awareness increases all the time, one becomes more and more skilled in it and fluent, even though it is the same old awareness. When we do something, often, it can become an art. A craftsman uses his old saw or knife, but he is skilled and gets better and better. If we were to use his saw or knife, we couldn't do the things he can. It is an art. Athletes are the same, they play for a long time and they become artists, they are fluent and they can be champions. A boxer, for example, when he trains for a long time, can win. Knowing the beginning stages is like a cheerleading team, it gives support to make progress and not to regress. Seeing thought, being a human being. If one practices in the right way and there is right view, right aspiration will arise, and then right action, right effort, and so on. Energy arises and one will see things continuously. One watches and watches and watches. And suddenly, one will see thought. When one sees thought, it happens accidentally. Before, one saw it also, from the beginning of seeing the mind, seeing Dhamma, seeing Rupa Nama is the same. But now, one is suddenly confronted with thought, one really sees it, one sees thought. Before, one saw it too, but not clearly. It was indistinct, one saw it as a stream. But now, one really sees it clearly, one really contacts it. It is hard to express. Thought is something gross, something unjust. On seeing thought, one doesn't just see it and that's all. As soon as one sees thought, the thought collapses, the grossness, and its not being just, cease to be. The unintentional thought stops, it comes to an end. Before, we didn't know thought, but when we see it, the mind rises up. Of this one might say, one has now become a human being. The mind is on a higher level than before, there is a victory. There is no burden, it has put it down. That's what it feels like. It really is hard to describe. I'm now talking about it too fast. Before one has such an experience, it takes quite a while, many days or many months. One knows incessantly and the mind progressively rises higher. One could talk in terms of the mind rising up, or in terms of the mind being purified, being cleaned. When one sees thought, one realizes that one is now a human being. Being a human being is this, it is this state. One sees and understands what angels are, they are not anywhere out there. To be an angel is to have a sense of shame of wrongdoing, one can under no circumstances, do, speak, or think evil things. The body, as well as speech and the mind are clean. This is what it means to be an angel. To have a sense of shame to do what is bad, is something that others cannot see. But one sees it oneself. Before, the mind could think whatever it liked, all sorts of crazy and wrong thoughts. But on seeing like this, it is as if there is virtue. One sees what angels are. I used to think that they lived in the sky, and sometimes I called for them to come and help me. Well, these days, angels are supporting me. They praise me. The door to the realm of the hungry ghosts, hell beings, thick-headed demons, and the animal realm has been closed for sure. I can guarantee that I won't get reborn in any of those realms. Now, the mind is as high as the mind of an angel, a Brahma god or a divine being. Oh, a human being is like this. The Buddha said that to be born as a human being is a great gain, it is an excellent thing. Integrated virtue, knowing the path to follow. One can stand on one's own feet at this point. There is virtue now. Once there is virtue, one knows. It is the training in virtue. It is integrated virtue, the kind of virtue that goes in the direction of the paths and fruits of practice. One may as well say that there is virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom. Virtue helps, gives more energy, the power of virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom help even more. One sees and understands the path. Watching all the way through, this state of watching and seeing, and when seeing, not being caught up, this is the path. One sees and understands this, one gets a foundation here. When one knows the basic stage of Rupa Nama, one falls in the well of knowledge and joy and analytical knowledge arise, which are defilements due to insight. One sees Rupa Nama, then the three characteristics, convention, and one falls in the well of knowledge, there is so much reflection in the mind. But I depended on Luangpor Teean, who taught us in the mornings and evenings. He said, watch well, when you see suffering, don't be the one who suffers, when there is happiness, don't be the one who is happy, when peace arises, don't be the one who is peaceful. Know and see these things, Don't get caught up in them. I got a good foundation from the beginning, it supported me. It's like a young student that goes to a good school, he or she gets support and is able to learn well. I saw the path, it has been the path all along. This path aided me to go to higher levels, comparable to studying at a high school and then at a university. Sometimes my fellow practitioners at that time said that they knew Rupanama, but from their actions, behavior, and speech, one could see that it wasn't so. They still quarreled, they still did things without awareness, their minds still concocted things up, and they acted without clarity. This indicated that they didn't know yet. When one reaches this point, of seeing Rupanama, how could one think or do like that? Just thinking is already something defiled, and to then speak or act so that one is a burden and quarrels arise, would be impossible. When there is a high level of practice, not just using reasoning and memory, then one sees the path. It is the whole of the practice. One becomes experienced at seeing Rupanama, just like the craftsman using his old saw or knife to become an artist. When one is fluent, this is the path, it is the whole of the practice. It is purity, that is to say the state of watching and seeing, and on seeing not being caught up. This is purity, it is the highest virtue, the highest firmness of mind and the highest wisdom. The aggregates of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya are close together, so much so that there is nothing that is soiled. One feels clean, like someone who has put on clean clothes. One won't let anything soil one's clean clothes. Stains will be seen clearly because one's clothes are clean, and so dirt and dust can't remain, it will be brushed off immediately. The diamond of the Dhamma, being a noble one. To look inward is a diamond, it really is a diamond. It is the diamond of the Dhamma. I rarely talk about this. Wherever I go, I talk about being the watcher, watching and seeing, and on seeing not to be. This is the direct way to destroy identification with conditions. This is the diamond that melts down or drills a hole in the fetters. How can the ego remain? Self-view is about the ego, and so is attachment to precepts and practices, the first two of the fetters. The state of watching and seeing, and having seen not being, is very swift. If you don't have any knowledge, then know this matter first and practice with it, it is a shortcut. The way I see it is that, this is putting one on the right track. Just catch on to this. Don't be foolish and get lost, see. And on seeing, don't go and get caught up with what you see. Just pass by, keep passing things. This is the freeway. This is the path. It is the most convenient for practicing, one doesn't waste time, doesn't get stuck or hooked. Don't sit with closed eyes, that's crazy. See what's there. Happiness and peace, for example, see it and pass on. Those fetters are unable to stay. The first three fetters just fall apart. And one really becomes a noble individual. This is the exalted mind, the good mind. At this point, one can know for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that one is a noble one. Being a noble one happens at this point. The door of the good Dhamma is right here. The state of watching, seeing, and not being is the door to the truth. The noble Sankhya arises at this point. This is not being a noble one through convention, it is more than just reciting the words of the ordination procedure, that is convention. Being a monk is real in the conventional sense, but being a noble one arises at this point. The point of destroying the fetters and the ego. This realization is for the extinguishing of suffering, or the taming of defilement, it brings about coolness, one doesn't cause any trouble or danger, neither for oneself nor for others. Impurities are melted down and digested. There is no more me and mine. This is due to the power of the knowledge from the beginning stages upwards, seeing the three characteristics, convention and suffering. That knowledge is a powerful support to make progress in a dignified and bold manner. Whether it is the 3, 5, or 10 fetters, they all fall apart. There is an enormous energy that causes one to penetrate through. It is the aggregate of sila, samadhi, and panya. It is supreme virtue, supreme firmness of mind and supreme wisdom. It is complete purity. The body doesn't do anything bad, speech doesn't say anything bad, and the mind doesn't think anything bad. It is purity, it is the whole of the Buddhist way of life. Knowing jhana and jnana. The cankers of sensuality, being and not knowing, which are part of one's character, drop off, as well as defilements such as foolishness, anger, desire, delusion, and belief in all sorts of rites and rituals. They drop off by themselves, one doesn't do anything with them. It is comparable to shaking a tree that has fruits in it, the fruits come down by themselves. But some fruits, one has to pick oneself or get them down with a long pole. This state is like the simile that Luangpor Teean gave of the leech. A leech is sucking our blood, if we pull it off, it will come off, but with difficulty, one side of it comes loose but the other side is stuck. But there is a method for this. When we mix some kerosene with tobacco and squeeze it onto the leech, it will drop off by itself. In the same way, there is a method to let defilements such as the latent tendencies, the three cankers or whatever name they may have, drop off. It is not difficult. It happens in a finger snap. Just like a leech. It's like some custard apples that shrivel up and become black, up in the tree. In the same way, one knows and sees sensual desire, desire for forms and desire for what is formless. One understands the jhana, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Each jhana has a certain number of factors, 4, 3, or 2. This is the level of refinement, the level of purity, of not being stuck. Until one is not stuck or attached at all, it is zero. Zero means that there is no value. Let me tell you, it is life where I doesn't have value, nothing is left of it, of the sense of self. Zero. The unlocking, the five aggregates stop working. The development of awareness reaches the state of watching. Jnana or wisdom knowledge is fixed and burns things up, nothing can stand in its way. Purity reaches its perfection. It is natural, it is the law of nature. I don't know how it happened, but the lock gets unlocked, it is as if something falls off, as if something snaps. One could say that the five aggregates, namely, form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness drop off. Before, they worked together, it was their job to do so, but now, they stopped working, they've come to a halt and they have returned to nature. Everything has gone back to nature. It's all finished, it has stopped. There is nothing left. It feels as if there is nothing left to do. The goal of life has been reached. There is vision of the unborn, the non-aging, non-sickness, and the deathless. The Buddha, the Dhamma, the paths and fruits of practice, Nibbana, and the noble Sangha really exist. This reflects back to my father and mother who painstakingly raised their children. It is natural for parents to do that. They do so in order to let life reach its final destination. Well, it has been worthwhile. This happened at the time of having the midday meal. Usually I didn't have a midday meal, because Luangpor Teean said that he wanted us to practice continuously, and effectively in developing awareness. And so I asked my friends for the opportunity to not get involved in the various activities. In case I would not show up for the meal for over 7 days, then to come and check on me. But if I would fast for 2, 3 days, then there was no need to come and ask what was going on. If I wanted to eat I would come, and if I didn't want to eat I wouldn't come. That's what I said. That day, I came for the meal. I had the meal together with Luangpor Teean. As I was eating, I watched myself, there were just processes. A hand with 5 fingers taking a lump of rice and putting it into the mouth was just a process. Talking, eating, sleeping, they are all just processes. They are not intentional actions, karma. It was really utterly finished. After the meal, the other monks all left, but I kept sitting there. Luangpor Teean asked me, "What's up?" I told him, "I've come to the end of things, Luangpor, there is nothing left. Luangpor Teean said, it's an art, isn't it? Yes, it is, Luangpor. Next, Luangpor said, just practicing this much and you get these results. Does the Buddha really exist? Yes. Do the paths, fruits, and nibbana really exist? Yes, they do. Is there a noble Sangha? Yes, there is. Helping people to get rid of suffering is one's duty. Then, he said, teaching people to know like this, is better than making merit by building a monastery, a ceremonial hall or material things. We have to work together, doing our duty to teach people to overcome suffering. This is the profound past of my life. I remember a big tree that gave lots of shade. My hut was on the east side of the monastery. The Buddhayana Forest Monastery. It was there that my life changed. These memories are deeply embedded in my heart. May you listen to these words with earnestness, don't bother about who it is that is speaking the words. In memory of Luangpor Teean. I bow to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I pay respects to the senior monks and all fellow practitioners, and blessings to all of you lay people and upright men and women. This is the time to listen to Dhamma, as we do every morning and evening. I will talk about things that we are practicing with, things that we can use in our study of the Dhamma. This can bring about a balance, a point of understanding and realization. The more we take the opportunity to practice, to develop awareness, to make contact with awareness, to let the body experience awareness, the more we see delusion. What is delusion? How does the experience of awareness differ from delusion? It is a lesson for us to see these things that are happening within. Being aware is to experience things, directly, it is not thought. It is not reasoning, or anything to do with like and dislike, that is not the way we study. Rather, we practice. We have the intention to build up awareness. Delusion is ahead of us, but we see it clearly. Delusion can come from many causes. It can come from thought, or it may arise by way of the eye, ear, nose, body, or mind. Both internal and external conditions are involved. Delusion arises, even though that is not our intention. We see it. This state of seeing is a realization. Anything that one realizes is a matter of practicing Vipassana. To meditate means to develop a lot of awareness. Being diligent to know, is what meditation is. We recognize when there is no knowing. For example, we see feelings, we didn't ask for them to arise, they arise by themselves. They arise in the body, rupa, and in the mind. We see them, we don't deny anything whatsoever. We don't deny what arises, anything that is connected with the body and the mind. This is the way that Luangpor Teean teaches. And so we follow what our teacher says. He is our example. He would teach and he was an example by his behavior. This is what we take as our standard. We can learn through external means such as the movements with arms and hands, we can learn to feel the movements. This is what Luangpor Teean taught. And further, he taught to see the various changing conditions, such as thoughts and feelings, and to not be caught in them. For example, thought, to see thought, not to go into thought, to see the mind thinking. He taught very clearly. But some people don't understand, the words are easy to say but when we practice, we can't do it. We use thought in our practice, which only messes things up. Luangpor Teean said to know in a direct way. See thought, don't be tangled up in thought. That is the right way. And having seen it, we return to awareness of the body. We should take an interest in the movements of the body, just doing that much can put a stop to thought. It's easy. What makes things difficult is that we go and mess with thought. Whatever arises in the body or the mind, it is our duty to be the watcher. The function of awareness is to watch, not to deny anything. There are many things to watch, so we shouldn't get carried away with things. Somebody who practices according to Luangpor Teean's method of being aware of bodily movements, is one who has steadiness and clarity within. To make a mess by thinking a lot, using reasoning, figuring out what is right and wrong, and following one's likes and dislike, is not the way. Practice directly, just be interested in this one thing. Awareness. Fix on the movements. It is not hard to be aware, actually, it's easier than being caught in things. Any sensation in the body will do, and one will be able to catch the feeling of awareness. Make yourself skilled in being aware of the body, it is a training. But make it clear, to know clearly is the first step, do it the right way and see clearly. For example, we put our hands on the knees. We really know that our hands are on the knees. Whoever may say that we don't know, that's their business. Turning up the hand, we know. The objects that we know really exist. They are objects that we experience for ourselves. Raising the arm, we know, it is a clear knowing. It is an answer or solution in itself. However we move, we know. Besides this knowing, we see the feelings that arise, crystal clear. We don't get caught up in feelings. We see the feelings, and that is the solution. Anything that arises in the body or mind, that we see clearly, is a solution in itself. One sees thought, for example, and thought cannot fool one anymore. One sees feeling, and feeling can no longer fool one. Every time that something arises, one is ready to respond. One gets a foundation that makes one pass on all the time. If one gets caught up in something, it stands out. For example, one becomes happy or sad, and there is a self in those feelings. Or there is a self in thought, thought takes us to right and wrong, to like and dislike, and so it becomes a long story. But if we just see it, it is very short. Just knowing it, oh, I know already. Whatever thought it may be, it is just thought. Whatever feeling it is that arises, it is just feeling. It is not anything else. But when we are not aware, we don't know, we don't see it. And we are fooled by the convention in thought and feeling. If we catch on to the main principle, the development of awareness through using movements, is extremely convenient. The various postures are a big aid. There are many ways to escape. There are so many occasions to find a path. But if we go and think about practice, getting involved in what we like and dislike, then it becomes a long story. For some people, just ordinary thinking is already a problem, and everything gets messed up. But if one knows, there is no problem. We just simply see that the mind thinks. This is thought. Then, we can return to the movements. We keep watching and wisdom arises, seeing the body and the mind gives rise to wisdom. But in the beginning, maybe nothing will happen. But establish a foundation, by making the movements with the hands and arms. The ability to watch will develop itself. A discovery will take place. One discovers that the body really is, just, rupa, there is not any self to be found there. Rupa is part of nature, and many conditions manifest in it. Feeling, for instance, is a condition of rupa. Heat, cold, pain, and hunger, are conditions of rupa, and so we solve these problems. Once we have a foundation and we see that they are conditions of rupa, we become skilled. Nothing is concealed for us any longer. The various conditions line up to show us what they are. They reveal themselves. One knows all about rupa now. This is wisdom knowledge, that penetrates all matters that are concerned with rupa. One has discovered all of it. At the moment that these things arise, one is able to solve the problem, one knows now. Whenever feelings arise, it is their business. One understands this now. There is no self in feelings of hot and cold, or in hunger and pain. In short, it's all just feeling. Wisdom knowledge arises, realization, one penetrates the three characteristics of impermanence, valuelessness, and non-selfhood. The result is zero. This means that nothing remains of rupa, there is no more self in rupa, it has all been given back to nature, according to reality. This realization could be called a discovery, a seeing, or one might call it liberation, vimutti. As soon as one sees clearly, liberation takes place automatically. Just as when we see a snake, the snake doesn't bite us. Or when we see thorns, we won't step on them. The state of seeing is the most excellent thing, it is sufficient, it is virtue, firmness of mind and wisdom in itself. The state of seeing is insight meditation in itself. The various conditions don't delude us. We're smart in the ways of rupa, they disclose themselves. Nature teaches us. It teaches us what impermanence, valuelessness, non-selfhood, heat, cold, happiness, suffering, etc., are like. This is wisdom. One understands all things. Nama, or the affairs of the mind, are the same. When one sees rupa, one will inevitably see nama. One sees that they are a pair, they are both movements in a person who is not dead. These movements, especially thoughts, can be poisonous and dangerous, if we don't know and understand them. Then it becomes a big deal. But the bottom line is that, it is all just nama dhamma, mental phenomena. Someone who is still alive tends to think. And thought is not anything mighty. But in particular, unintentional thoughts make up a long story if we are not aware. It is the birthplace of many, many things. Defilements, craving, lust, anger, desire, delusion, love, hate, and so on. All these things are rooted in thought. There are two kinds of thought, stealthy thought and intentional thought. Intentional thoughts, naturally, come to an end. Nobody wants to intentionally think. But the sneaky thoughts are like rubbish. They are sankhara, conditions, formations, they are the cause of suffering, samudaya. These thoughts arise by themselves, without us having intention. Mental conditions work very diligently. The Buddha compared them with a potter. Things that arise from sneak thoughts, are like the shapes and forms that a potter produces. Whatever pots and things the potter makes, big or small, beautiful or ugly, they all have to break, eventually. Whatever arises from thought is not permanent, and is not self. We are the ones who lose ourselves in them. For example, a thought arises and we get angry. Anger is impermanent. It is a condition, it is a cause for suffering to arise. Whatever is a condition is impermanent. One can foretell it, that the condition will pass away. Face conditions with this fact. In this way, they won't establish themselves. It means that we know in time. It is like watching a conjurer. If we have sharp eyes and know what's going on, we don't believe his tricks and it is not fun. The more he performs, the clearer we see what he's doing. We see the deception. What is happening in our minds is just the same, we see what happens clearly. We see the trickery, maya, of rupa nama, of objective matter and all kinds of changing conditions. We realize this. We don't go along with it. And so it stops. We are free now. This really is topmost wisdom. The method of developing awareness by making use of movements is a shortcut, it is straight and suitable for everyone. It is a universal principle. Everybody has the same problem. As soon as we can catch the feeling of awareness, we all become one being. For example, if we are aware while sitting here, then we all are one person. The feeling of awareness is exactly the same for everyone. But when we are deluded, we are different people with different states of mind, feelings, thoughts, and so on. At one time, I went to teach meditation at Harvard University in the States. There were many students there. I didn't teach anything much, I just told them to do the rhythmic meditation for 10 minutes, so that they would know the sensations of bodily movements. When they stopped, I asked, "Just now, where were you?" Many of them answered that they were with awareness. When we are with awareness, we are one, we are the same. This is something that is possible. We are then beyond sex, nationality, and language. Among the people who were practicing, there were Chinese, Thais, Cambodians, and many other nationalities. They were all very clever students. This is one of the most famous universities in the world. If one is not especially intelligent, one can't study there. In Thailand, we have a doctor who took ordination at Sukatho Forest Monastery, the place where Luangpor resides. He got a PhD at Harvard. He was the one to take us there. He also gave the same answer. Awareness is not male or female, it is not young or old, it has nothing to do with being a monk or a layperson. Awareness is awareness. To whom does awareness belong? It belongs to one who knows. Whoever knows immediately has awareness. And what's it like to be aware? Well, there is no delusion. Delusion diminishes in proportion to the amount of awareness one has. One can solve and avoid delusion and problems. There are immediate results. When one is aware, one doesn't have to wait for results. Whenever we are aware, we get the results straight away. No need to wait for an hour or tomorrow. It is Hapajit Thung, to be experienced individually, right there. We turn the hand up and we know, we raise the arm and we know. It is not like planting rice, pepper, or whatever, that takes a year or half a year. But with developing awareness one gets results immediately. Whoever is very diligent will get lots of results. But some people seem to be diligent in getting deluded. This tends to happen because when we start focusing on awareness, thoughts are pushed to the surface. This deludes us in all sorts of ways. So try to make awareness crystal clear. Don't let it be 50% awareness and 50% delusion. In developing awareness one needs to stay with things and to make things clear. No matter what it is that we're training in, be in time and make it clear. Whether it is science, art, handicraft, or meditation, if we keep up with it and follow it through, we will understand. Sometimes one can even know beforehand. Knowledge about meditation is the same as other kinds of knowledge, try to make it very clear. One half of awareness and one half of delusion is no good. Some people are caught up in a lot of things while doing the rhythmic meditation. Some people even chat and joke with others while practicing meditation. They just perfunctorily make the movements. There is no intention and no attention. This is not meditation, and there won't be results. We have to add intention to the movements. We have to be attentive in order to know, this is called making effort. When delusion arises, we pay attention, so that the knowing arises. This is putting forth effort. Effort means to have the attention, to always be aware. The attention that makes one know all the time could be called samadhi, firmness of mind. When there is delusion and one makes effort to know, one changes delusion into knowing, this is called wisdom. Sila, samadhi, and panya, all come together at this point. If we start off in the right way, we'll do just fine and it won't take long. But if we don't start off in the right way, we'll be confused and unclear. Even sleepiness is a big problem for some people, or restlessness. One girl said to me, "Oh, today, it was a real hassle, I had so many thoughts." If we practice in the right way, it's not like that, we can solve it in a finger snap. It is not difficult at all to deal with thought, it's easy. Some people concoct up all sorts of things. In 1968, there was an old monk doing the rhythmic meditation, at the monastery in Bohome village, Luangpor Teean's home village. There were just the two of us there. Myself, I was walking up and down above him. Every now and then, the sound of shoe slapping someone's head could be heard. I looked down and saw what was going on. I asked him, "What are you doing?" "The mind keeps thinking, I don't know why it's thinking all the time," he said. One's own thoughts are a big problem. To the extent that one beats one's head with one's slippers. For some people, it is as if there is someone in one's head, thinking. Conditions are being concocted into states of mind and feelings of self. There is no end to it. But if we see thought, whack, we can smile inwardly. We see delusion. This is the best lesson there is. This is quite a profound experience, and one kind of feels proud of oneself. Whatever it may be that arises, that is not awareness, all of that is a lesson to us. There is nothing that is wrong. Even sleepiness is the same. Some people won't do anything about it, they immerse in drowsiness and nod in all directions. When they close their eyes, they'll just fall asleep. They are stuck in that state forever. But when we take a good look at sleepiness, there is nothing difficult about it. It really can be solved and overcome. Then there is no more problem. But if we don't know how, and we are unclear, if awareness is not firmly established, it turns into a big thing, sleepiness. It makes one feel exhausted and there just isn't any energy. Sometimes in addition tension and headaches arise. We should try to wake ourselves up. If there is not a sense of being awake, then use different postures and look around you, look at the trees, take a deep breath and make awareness clear. Then, it is not a big thing. It is refreshing to see sleepiness. When one is caught up in sleepiness, one is lazy, it's the lazy mind that can only think of sleep. Laziness shrouds the mind. It's the stubborn mind, just like a kid that is stubborn. Whatever you tell it to do, it won't do it, it's just stubborn. If we understand this, we are clever and nothing can fool us. Thoughts can't fool us. In this way things become easier. In our entire life, there are only just two things, knowing and delusion. Just these two things. This is the conclusion, knowing and delusion. The cause for sleepiness, defilement, greed, hatred, craving, lust, worry, happiness, suffering, etc., is delusion. Delusion is the cause. There is no method to practice with delusion. Don't even try it. But the way to deal with delusion is by building up awareness. Only sati is able to clear up delusion. Delusion is the biggest of the defilements. If compared to the index finger, the middle finger, and the ring finger, delusion is the middle one. If there is delusion, anger, desire, love, and hate can arise too. Therefore delusion is the mightiest. When delusion is present, one is ready to be angry, ready to desire, etc. One inclines in the direction of the various impurities. The only method to do something about delusion is to be aware. It is very easy. It is the path. One sees and discovers the path. The method of developing awareness by making use of movements is applicable to everyone, regardless of sex, age, nationality, and language. It is a universal principle. Whoever tries it out won't be able to deny it. Nobody can deny it because it is a true principle. We have Luangpor Teean as our example, as our model. His life was exclusively devoted to the development and practice of awareness. I'd tried out several methods when I found out about this one. I was very satisfied with it. It was good enough for my life. One time some Westerners that were teaching their religion came to the place where I was teaching in the USA, together with their students. They were standing outside the room I was in, about 8 people. They asked to interview me, through the translator. I said, all right. They came in together with their disciples. They stood there and asked me, what is it that you know? You come here to teach, so what do you have to teach? I first told them to sit down. Then, I told them, I know myself. What does somebody who knows himself know? They wanted to know. So I told them to put their hands on their knees. Know when turning up the hand, know when raising the arm. This is knowing oneself. They tried it out. They knew once, twice, and on and on. I said in English, aware, aware. They were satisfied. They confessed that at first they had lots of questions, and had the intention to crush me. But when they experimented like this, they understood. Suppose one knows like this for a whole day, what will happen then? Or 1 month? Do you want to find out? This is what I know, other things I don't know about. You Westerners are able to go to the moon, but that kind of wisdom is worldly wisdom, it is not enlightened wisdom. Enlightened wisdom is to know in this way. They said they would try it out. The next day, one of them brought his father and a chair too. The father was quite old, so he practiced sitting on a chair. This is real stuff. It cannot be denied. We don't have to waste time. This is a true principle of life.
May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease.